Na tuombe. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu, ambaye kwa hekima na wema wako umeteua nyadhifa za viongozi na utawala wa mabunge kwa ustawi wa jamii na utawala na haki na wanadamu, twakusihi ututazame kwa neema nyingi sisi watumishi wako ambao umeridhika kutuita ili tutekeleze shughuli muhimu za jamhuri yetu. Twakuomba ututeremshie baraka zako sisi tuliokutanika hapa, na utujalie tuyatende na kuyafikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili utukufu na sifa zako ziendelezwe, na ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi yetu na wale ambao haja zao umezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Amina. Confirm whether we have quorum. Yes. We have. Proceed.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Is there a petition? Which one? Honorable Aramat Lemanken.
Thank you, Speaker. I, the undersigned, on behalf of residents of Narok County, draws the attention of the House to the following. That the SGR, the Standard Gauge Railway, is a Kenyan government flag project and is one of the major milestones toward achieving Kenya Vision 20. That the project is being executed in phases and is currently in phase 2. Consequently, SGR phase 2 corridors commence in Narok County at DK 97 in Ospukia sublocation and terminate at DK 120 Emuru Toto area. That the project has recently witnessed frequent protests by the locals and also unrest, particularly in phase 2A in section 5, 6 and Narok and 9 within Narok County due to the railway design safety challenges. The alleged challenges include track elevation at the point and the nearest to crossing to Suswa railway station. That the implementation of the project, some of the public roads, pathways, and being blocked to allow construction of the contractor has failed to provide alternative roads, and also the railway corridors transverse through individual parcels of land, making some parcels inaccessible by the owners. Further, that the residents allege employment-related conflicts such as termination of employees' contracts without following due process, few opportunities offered to the locals at less than 70%. That non-recruitment process and the language barrier has contributed to the poor terms of synergy and hence frequent staff unrest, thereby adverse affecting project implementation. That several motor vehicles accidents involve the contractor vehicles have been reported and that the contractor has failed to compensate victims or relatives of the victims. That the lack of policy framework for blasting at Suswa and Siabei area has brought about myriad of environment challenges such as noise pollution, vibration and dust pollution, coupled with lack of environmental impact assessment reports on baseline survey on the effect of blasting on neighboring buildings and other structures. That the project has interfered with the wildlife inhabitants' migration corridors in the Suswa Conservancies and areas around DK 909, posing inhabitants of many species of birds and an environmental risk. That while land acquisition, particularly along the railways, the SGR corridor, including Section 2A within Narok County, was published by the Government Gazette of 22nd December 2007, an auditorium to the effect gazetted on 2nd February 2018, the government failed to gazette an additional land acquisition necessitated by inclusion of additional crossing along the SGR corridor and rerouting of public roads and paths. That the contractor has not put in place a drainage system, hence flooding is experienced in most parts of the county. That effort to address the matter with the contracted company has not yielded fruits. The matter in respect which this petition is made is not pending before any court of law or constitutional body. Therefore, your humble petitioners pray that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing, one, investigate the matter raised within view of addressing the petitioner plea. Two, cause the contractor to publish and circulate the environmental impact assessment. Three, make any recommendation the committee might find fit in circumstance of this petition. And your petitioners will forever pray. Presented by Honorable Lemanka Naramat, member of Narok East constituency. Thank you.
Very well. Comments, observations, and clarifications, member for Makueni. What is happening? Is it the case that you can move on this side?
And thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving an opportunity to comment on this very important petition. Mr. Speaker, we went through this in Makueni recently when the construction of the railway was going on through at that particular point. My comment would be that there be a better way of engaging the community, because these international contractors, if you do not engage the communities in advance, it's going to delay their work, it's going to cost the government a lot more. And some of these matters can easily be resolved if the communities and the people come together and together with the contractor, especially the idea of the percentages of the locals who are going to work in that particular experience. Mr. Speaker, you would imagine in the case of Narok, if the locals are not working at the railway line, then who will? It means automatically the locals then will not allow any other people to come to the project, and it's going to be disrupted. And for the benefit of this country, that there be close consultation, especially with the elected leadership and the owners of the contract, so that, Mr. Speaker, this line could be expedited. And that's what we did when it went through Makueni County, and there were constant consultations, Mr. Speaker, and I believe this will also work for Narok. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to comment on this petition. Mr. Speaker, I would like to observe that a dangerous precedent is being set in this country, where Kenyans or politicians imagine that if flagship projects are being undertaken in this country, and those flagship projects are going through their regions, then they have all the rights to undermine, interfere, or even try to stall those projects from going on. Mr. Speaker, a case of petition which has been presented here is a clear case of people who want to interfere with national flagship projects. Why would it be obvious that if this project is passing through Narok, that only residents of Narok are qualified to work in those projects? There are examples, Mr. Speaker, where some people from some regions have been sent away from working in projects in certain regions because they don't belong to those regions. I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, that this petition is not necessary, Mr. Speaker, and when a project has been sanctioned by the national government, there are procedures that have been identified, that have been looked at, and there are modalities of addressing those challenges. Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with you that this House should reject this petition so that the issues that are being raised can be handled with the relevant authorities that are in charge of implementing the project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, I think it's only fair to remind ourselves that with regard to petitions, I don't know, am I audible? Yes. That the committee to which a petition is referred to is required to inquire into whatever the matter is and report to the petitioner or petitioners, as the case may be, and table a report here. So the House has, and the report is not even supposed to be debated. So it's important that that be understood. So the House cannot reject the petition. Honorable Watandi. So, but I'm sure now you are better informed. The petition will be committed to the committee to which it is addressed, Transport, Public Works and Housing, to deal with it within the provisions of Standing Order number 227. We move to the next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Leader of majority, you don't know? Oh. The paper I have here shows as the leader of majority has
no papers.
2 papers.
He's tired of presenting.
Very well, choose the next week. B. Chairman, Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. What is happening? It's working.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, November 29, 2018. Reports of the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resource. On 1, the budget implementation for the 3rd and the 4th quarter for the financial year 2017-2018 for vote number 1105, Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Vote number 1103, Ministry of Water and Sanitation. Vote number 1106, State Department for Wildlife, and vote number 1091, State Department for Mining. 2, report of the delegation to the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change Conference held on 30th April to 10th May 2018 in Bonn, Germany. And finally, report of the delegation to the Global Legislative Summit on National Parks and Protected Areas held on 24th to 27th September 2018 in Washington, D.C., United States of America. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of Delegation, Abnak.
Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, sir, I wish to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, November 28, 2018. The report of the APNAC delegation to the second annual conference of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants held jointly with APNAC Kenya as a partner, held in Mauritius on the 15th to the 18th of August 2018.
Next.
Second, Honorable Speaker, I have the honor of also raising a second paper. I beg to raise the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, 29th November 2018, a report of the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, GOPAC, held alongside with the 7th Conference of the State Parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, held in Vienna, Austria from the 6th to the 10th of November 2017. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Before we go to the next order, allow me to recognize the presence of 52 members of the AIPCA Women Group from Timau East, Bore constituency, Meru County. Next question. Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
Honourable members, at a request due to some urgency, I will start with the member for Kisumu West constituency, the Honourable John Olagwa-Luoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. Mr. Speaker, I stand to ask question number 257 of 2018. A, to the Cabinet Secretary for Lands and Physical Planning. A, when was the parcel of land reference number 332/182, Maseno Township, Kisumu County, originally allocated to the Administration Police? B, under what circumstances was part of this parcel of land reallocated to private developers and new parcels of land created? And could the Cabinet Secretary provide the names and identities of the persons or institutions that benefited from this illegal reallocation? C, what steps has the Ministry or the Land Commission taken to ensure that the parcel of land reverts back to the National Police Service? And further, what action is the Ministry taking to secure all parcels of land allocated to the National Police Service in the whole country? Presented today by Honorable John Olagwa-Luoch, Kisumu West. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, question referred to the Departmental Committee on Lands to prioritize. Members, we now go to question number 243, member for Awendo constituency, Honorable John Walter Owino. Sorry, honorable members, the honorable member asked my permission to be away today on some bereavement. He requested the question to be deferred. It's accordingly so ordered. And we go to the question by the member for Kamukunji constituency. Honourable members, learn to put your cards there because now I can't even see. Then you must be pressing wrong buttons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to raise question number 245 of stroke 2018, which is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs. A, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that on the 7th of November 2018, a Kenyan journalist, Madam Mudhoki Mumo, together with a colleague, were arrested and detained by Tanzanian authorities while they were on a visit to Tanzania? B, why was the journalist held by the Tanzanian authorities and what interventions were taken, and what assistance accorded by the Kenyan High Commission in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania to the journalist? C, how many Kenyans are currently detained in Tanzanian police cells, remands, and prisons? And what steps has the government of Kenya taken to protect, defend, and assist Kenyans who are harassed, mistreated, and arbitrarily detained by the Tanzanian authorities?
Very well. Refer to the Departmental Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations to prioritize. Next question by the member for Baringo Central, Joshua Chebiegon Kadie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to ask question 253, 2018. A, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that there have been increased cases of insecurity in Baringo Central? B, what measures are being put in place by the ministry to curb the increased cases of insecurity and harassment of border operators by police officers?
Very well.
Thank you.
Refer to the Departmental Committee on National Security, Administration of National Security. Next question by the member for Vihiga, Beatrice Andagala.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I wish to ask a question number 255/2018 to the Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Forestry. A, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that community land covering Maragoli Hills in Mungoma Ward, Kisingila, Dabongo, Buhani, Lodenyi, and Musova of Vihiga Sub-County is being claimed and converted to Maragoli forest land? B, what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that the people living on the said land are compensated and settled appropriately? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Referred to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. Next question by the member for Embakasi East, Babu Owino Paul Ongili.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to ask question number 256 of 2018 to the Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection. A, could the Cabinet Secretary explain why the National Social Security Fund has not issued title deeds to the residents of Tasia Estate following completion of payments of the said parcels of land? B, when will the National Social Security Fund refund the 920,000 Kenya shillings to the residents of Tasia Estate meant for the construction and rehabilitation of roads in the area, noting that they are not mandated to undertake road construction? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Refer to the Committee on Labor and Social Welfare to prioritize. Next, the member for Molo constituency, Francis Kuria Kimani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question number 258 of 2018 to the Cabinet Secretary of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development. A, is the Cabinet Secretary aware of the deplorable and bad state of Nakuru, Njoro, Molo Road, and especially for the stretch between Njoro and Molo? And number two, Mr. Chair, that considering the importance of the said road as it is used as a bypass for motorists that want to avoid the Nakuru, Salga, Sachangwan, Toto Road, and as the only tarmac road linking Njoro, Molo constituencies and Kuresoi South and Kuresoi North constituencies, what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that this road is repaired and made into a usable state? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Refer to the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. Finally, member for Gichogo constituency, Gishimo Gidinji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Planning. A, could the Cabinet Secretary explain why the National Treasury has not issued letters of exemption for importation of duty-free machinery, equipments, and for tax exemption in relation to the construction of Diva Dam project that was launched on 23rd November 2017. B, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the master list for exemption submitted by the contractor in March 2018 has not been acted upon, and as a consequence, the contractor is considering suspending the works, which will be a major drawback to the project, as well as the intended food security, lack of job opportunities for the Gishogo residents, and the adverse effects to the economy generally? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Referring to the Department of Finance and Planning to prioritize for response by the Cabinet Secretary. Next order. Sorry, the statements. I can see the member is number 1 on the list. And he also prides himself as nominee 001.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to read my statement regarding United Nations Disability Day. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 43, I wish to make a statement regarding the United Nations World Disability Day to be celebrated on 3rd December 2018 in Kisumu County, the spirit of handshake. The theme for this year's celebration is empowering people with disability and ensuring inclusiveness and equality. Honorable Speaker, as preparation for the said day, leaders from 14 counties from the nomadic communities met in Isiolo County on Saturday, 13th October 2018, to participate in the 8th edition of the Desert Wheelchair Race to create awareness on the rights of persons with disabilities, especially the wheelchair users. The event was sponsored by NONDO, an non-governmental organization, Ministry of Devolution, Isiolo County Government, and other well-wishers. The race was well attended by the leadership from the pastoral communities, namely 7 governors, 2 cabinet secretaries, and 7 members of parliament, led by myself, among other county participants. Honorable Speaker, there is need to change the narrative of viewing persons with disability as a liability in the society. Statistics indicate that there are an estimated 400,000 wheelchair users in this country, meaning that if one wheelchair costs 30,000, Kenyans, 400,000 Kenyans are sitting on metal worth 12 billion, and a total of 6.6 million persons with disability in this country, translating to a market bigger than Mombasa, a market bigger than Nairobi City. In the world, there are 1.3 billion persons with disability, and if Kenya can attract 1% of this population as tourists, Kenya will benefit with 1 million tourists with disabilities. They are physically challenged but have potential in building the nation. Honorable Speaker, it is against this backdrop that I rise to urge all members, including the majority leader who is listening to me, that stakeholders to attend and participate in the important event in style. It is in my earnest request that participants in this year's event should sit on wheelchairs or be blindfolded the whole day to have a first-hand experience of what persons with disability go through in their daily activities. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I thought your statement is for general information, but you have also proposed that all members attending be placed on wheelchairs the whole day or be blindfolded. Well, they have hand, I'm sure that. I thought you wanted them to attend, but now when you suggest that you want them to remain blindfolded the whole day, I suspect that may be the reason why you may not get many of them. Very well. Information is, this is not this is, I can see the member for, the nominated member, Tanita Gatti, placing. This one you don't, there are no comments allowed. It's not a petition. So, sorry, you may not comment. It's for information, general information. Member for Pokot South, Chair of Public Works, Transport and Public Works.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to make this statement, which is very important for honorable members in performance of their duties and activities in their constituencies. Honorable Speaker, Article 95 of the Constitution empowers the National Assembly to provide oversight and accountability over the use of public resources appropriated for provision of various goods and services. Specifically, Article 95, Sub-Article 4, Honorable Speaker, enumerates the roles of National Assembly in public finance, which is as follows. 1, determine the allocation of national revenue between the levels of government. 2, appropriate funds for expenditure by various government entities. And 3, exercise oversight over national revenue and expenditure. Looking at these functions, Honorable Speaker, it is indeed clear that National Assembly wields significant power in influencing the final outcome of the national budget and provision of oversight to ensure proper utilization of approved revenue and expenditure. Honorable Speaker, in this regard, among the revenues whose expenditure must be oversighted by the National Assembly are disbursement from the Roads Maintenance Levy Fund that is managed by Kenya Roads Board, KRB, and shared through legislated formula between the National Roads Agency, Kenya, KERA, KURA, and Kenya Wildlife Authority. Honorable Speaker, my committee, therefore, recently sought information from the Kenya Roads Board on the gross allocation from fuel levy to counties, including allocation per county, Honorable Speaker, that they used a CRA formula to allocate that money, with the biggest chunk of it, Honorable Speaker, 415 million going to Nairobi, and the least is Lamu at 93 million, Honorable Speaker. Further, the committee also sought information, very important for honorable members from KERA, on the allocation from the fuel levy disbursement to each constituency, and status of disbursement, Honorable Speaker, to date of financial year 2018 and 19. And in the document which I'm laying, Honorable Speaker, on the floor of the House, every constituency is allocated 30 million for repairing of those roads, Honorable Speaker, and so far 10 million has been disbursed. Honorable Speaker, the committee also requested for information from State Department for Housing and Urban Development on World Bank financed Kenya Urban Support Program. Very important, Honorable Speaker, because honorable members will be seeing some of these activities happening. They would like to ask the question, and we are giving them the information today, Honorable Speaker. And this is going to 59 urban centers and affordable housing program, Honorable Speaker, regarding the cost of the house, how much will the house cost, the location where this house is going to be, financing, criteria for allocation, among others. Honorable Speaker, the committee received the information requested from the 3 agencies, that is, the Kenya Roads Board, Kenya Rural Roads Authority, and the Department for Housing, Urban Development. And I therefore, Honorable Speaker, wish to table the documents for the information of the House. And members can use this data, Honorable Speaker, to follow up on these projects in their constituencies and counties. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Have you finished?
Yes.
Very well. I think members have heard. Next one is by the Leader of Majority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44, subsection 2A, I rise to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee. A committee met on Tuesday this week at the rise of the House to prioritize business for consideration. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday next week, the House will consider in the Committee of the Whole House the Parliamentary Service Bill 2018, the Government Contracts Bill 2018, and the second reading of the following bills: the Capital Markets Amendment Bill 2018, the Circle Society Amendment Bill 2018, the National Flag, Emblems and Names Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 8 of 2018, the Assumption of Office of the County Government Bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, also scheduled for consideration on the same week as follows: the report of the Public Accounts Committee on the audited financial statements for the national government for the financial year 2014-2015, if it's not concluded this afternoon. The reports of the Departmental Committee on Health on Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital Project, the report of the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security on the vetting of nominees for Public Service Commission, the report of the Committee on Regional Integration on Information and Communication Technology Networks, and the report of on the Contingency Fund. Relating to questions, I wish to convey that having consulted with the chairpersons of departmental committees, the following questions by specified cabinet secretaries. The Cabinet Secretary for Lands will appear before the Committee on Lands and Physical Planning to answer questions number 190 of 2018 from Honorable Catherine Waruguru, MP, and on Thursday, 6 December 2018, to answer question number 154 of 2018 from Honorable Abdul. Two, the and Urban Development will appear before the Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing on Tuesday, 4th December 2018. 5, P, question 129 from Honorable John Amburu, MP. Question number 132 from the Honorable Moses Cheboy, MP. Question number 142 from the Honorable Paul Mwirigi, MP. Question number 145 from Honorable Moses Injendi, MP. Question number 169 from Honorable Rueda Obo Mohammed, MP. Question number 176 from Honorable Bernard Shinali, MP. Question number 192 from Honorable James Murgo, MP. Question number 199 from Honorable Aden Yusuf, MP. Question number 224 from the Honorable Beatrice Nkatha, MP. Cabinet Secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government on Administration and National Security on Thursday, 6 December 2018, to answer question number 130 from Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, MP. Question number 135 from Honorable Aisha Juma, MP. Question number 137 from the Honorable Kathuri Murungi, MP. Tidi Mwambire, MP. Question number 153 from the Honorable Hirbaye Said Baya, MP. Question number 171. Question number Halima. Honorable George Gitonga, MP. Question number 193 from the Honorable Safia Aden, MP. Question number 196 from the Honorable Joseph Tanui, MP. And lastly, question number 261 from the Honorable Alice Wahome, MP. Number 4, the Cabinet Secretary for Defense will appear before the Committee on Defense and Foreign Relations to answer questions from 0 to number 6, 7 from the Honorable Omar Maalim, MP. Question number 162 from the Honorable. And question number to answer question from the Honorable Gideon. Number 5, the Cabinet Secretary for Education will appear before the Committee on Education and Research on Thursday, December 6, to answer questions number 022 from the Honorable Gideon Koskei, question number 30030 from the Honorable Omboka Milemba, MP, question number 048 from the Honorable Bernard Shinali, MP. Lastly, the Cabinet Secretary, the Cabinet Secretary for Health will appear before the Committee on Health on Thursday, 6 December, to answer questions 141 from the Honorable Elijah Memusi, question number 030 from the Honorable Omboka Milemba, and question number 048 from the Honorable Bernard Shinali. And lastly, the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock will appear before the Committee on Agriculture and Livestock on Tuesday, 4th December 2018, to answer question 267 from the Honorable Alfred Keter, MP. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the House Business Committee will reconvene on Tuesday, 4th December 2018, at the rise of the House to consider business for the coming week. I now wish to lay this statement as a record on the table of the House.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 8, procedural motion, limitation of debate on a specified report.
Leader majority.
Honorable Speaker, very rare to get to be visited in the chamber by Millie Odhiambo on this side. So I had to make sure that around me here everything is safe. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move this procedural motion that notwithstanding the provisions of Standing Order 97-4 and the House Resolution of February 14, 2018, limiting speech in a debate on a report of a committee, that this House further orders that debate in the report of the Committee on Regional Integration on the East Africa Community Protocol on Information and Communication Technology Networks be limited as follows: a maximum of 1 hour with not more than 10 minutes for the mover in moving, 5 minutes for any other member speaking, including the leader of majority party and the leader of minority party, and 5 minutes before the expiry of the time the mover shall be called upon to reply. And further, the priority in speaking shall be accorded to the leader of majority party, the leader of minority party, in that order. Speaker, this is just a procedural motion, just to make sure that in order number 11, and of course, order number 11, when we reach there, we will only deal with that matter 1 hour, with the 10 minutes for the mover and 5 minutes for any other person speaking, and him be given 5 minutes to reply. I beg to move and ask Honorable Chris Wamalwa, a member of the leadership, to second.
Honorable Wamalwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second this procedural motion. Mr. Speaker, of late we've realized such procedural motions are very key because we have a lot of business that we need to work within the time frame that we have. And again, we've realized 1 hour is actually enough because at times we go into the repetitions. So I truly support this and request members to be around so that we can clear this business. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I second.
Honourable members, I propose a question which is that notwithstanding the provision of Standing Order number 97, subsection 4, and the House Resolution of February 14, 2018, limiting speech in a debate on a report of a committee. This House further orders that debate in respect of the report of the Committee on Regional Integration on the East African Community, Protocol on Information and Communication Technology Networks be limited as follows: a maximum of 1 hour, with not more than 10 minutes for the mover in moving and 5 minutes for any other member speaking, including the Leader of the Majority Party and Leader of the Minority Party, and that 5 minutes before the expiry of the time, the mover shall be called upon to reply, and further that priority in speaking shall be according to the Leader of Majority and Leader of Minority Party, in that order. Therefore, put the question that notwithstanding the provisions of Standing Order number 97, subsection 4, and the House resolution on 14th February 2018 limiting speech in a debate on a report of a committee, this House further orders that debate in respect to the report of the Committee on Regional Integration on the East African Community Protocol on Information and Communication Technology Networks be limited as follows: a maximum of 1 hour, with not more than 10 minutes for the mover in moving and 5 minutes for any other member speaking, including the Leader of the Majority Party and the Leader of the Minority Party, and that 5 minutes before the expiry of the time, the mover shall be called upon to reply, and further that priority in speaking shall be according to the Leader of the Majority Party and Leader of the Minority Party, in that order. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say no? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the Government Contracts Bill, National Assembly Bills number 9 of 2018. Mover to reply.
Mover, Leader Majority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I really want to thank the members who contributed yesterday to this very important bill, the Government Contracts Bill 2018, with the principal objective that this bill is to provide for the making of contracts on behalf of the government and for any other connected purposes. And for this bill to be very, very clear in its clauses 6 to 11, it states very, very clear that one of the outstanding conditions that have been put in this bill is that any contract entered into by the national government or by a county government shall be subject to the threshold, precautionary threshold, which will be given that threshold and cleared by the Attorney General on behalf of the national government and the county attorney on behalf of the county government. So it's a very, very important bill. It's only a few pages. And as I've said in my statement, next week, Tuesday or Wednesday, we will have this bill, important bill. It's replacing an old act of 1957, I think, Government Contracts Act, Cap 28 of 1957 during the colonial. So I'm sure members will have time to prepare the amendments between now and Tuesday. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply.
Can I get a confirmation of the numbers?
Yes. They're good.
You know, members, sometimes it's only good that we can stay a bit, so that some of these things we can clear them, then, so then by next week, then members have an opportunity. But if you defer it to next week, then you know you. How many are there? Very well, honourable members. I'm told that the number has short to, now if I see the new inclusions, now it means that we are 55, 56. Very well, honourable members, I therefore put the question which is that the Government Contracts Bill, National Assembly Bill number 9 of 2018, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say no? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to repeal and reenact the Government Contracts Act and to provide for the powers of the government to enter into contracts and for connected purposes.
On the next order, sorry, before we move to the next order, what is your intervention, member for Kilifi North?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I would like to, in the morning, I tried to move amendment which was lost, but for the record, Mr. Speaker, I would like to table the document that was challenged to table in the morning to prove that really this is the contract for the said, the document for the said contract, which actually shows that one, Mr. Mutia Iringo signed the contract and therefore was in charge of the procurement process, including all those processes that are procurement. And therefore, one, Monica Juma, that is mentioned in the report, did not participate in the procurement process of the life insurance cover. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to beg your indulgence and table this document.
Well, they say for whatever worth. Maybe the chair of the committee would be, maybe you should have discussed with him.
I've had a discussion with the chair, and I think I've put him to speed on the whole thing, and I think he
Well,
is.
for now, you want to table the document.
I would like to table the document so it becomes a record.
Before you
of the
table
House.
it, you know, I have to have a look at it to determine
Yes.
whether it is capable of being tabled, so that you don't table something that could be. Very well, I think the document appears authentic, and it's accompanied by a letter addressed to the clerk, which is a letter of protest. But you see, unfortunately, it's coming now. You see, I am aware that your efforts at moving an amendment this morning when the report was being debated did not bear fruit. You see, as it is, our rules are that now you would have to, you would be, if you had to seek something different, you can only go by way of seeking the House to rescind its decision, understanding order number 49, and you know that is quite a tall order. But since you are not seeking that, you are seeking to table the documents. The documents, I rule that they appear authentic on the face of it, and they can therefore be tabled. But as I've said, for whatever worth they may be, because of course I'm not the chair of the committee. There's nothing out of order, Honorable Man. So you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the same and following the Order 49, Mr. Speaker, it is good for the House to note, because now this matter will go to implementation committee, that such information now do exist, Mr. Speaker, because it ties with the answered in the morning, Mr. Speaker, under Order 49. It cannot now proceed to committee of implementation, Mr. Speaker, but at least the House will have a record, Mr. Speaker.
Now, what is out of order? Because
Yes.
what is out of order? Because you rose to claim the House to note, but you know there is no motion for the House to note also. So I assume that you're just expressing yourself as a member of the House, that perhaps it would have been desirable if there was such a motion, but there is no such motion. So there's nothing that can. There's nobody asking the House to note.
I'm guided, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, because there's no motion. Either yourself or the Honorable Bar have not brought in a motion. The Honorable Bar said that he was challenged in the morning to table evidence, which he has, but he has tabled it after the fact. They say that after the horse has bolted. So it's perfect. That's perfect. Okay. Let's move to the next order.
Order number 10, motion. Report on the examination of the Auditor General's report on the financial statements for the national government.
The Chair, Public Accounts Committee to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to reply, and by replying, I wish also to thank my colleagues for supporting this report almost overwhelmingly. I also note that some amendments were made on it, which succeeded, and that can only help enrich the report, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the experience you've had, I can assure you that going forward, PAC reports can only get better. Thank you very much. I do what? I reply.
The Honorable Wandai has found himself in a very difficult position. He's not used to, because this is a serious business. Honourable members, the mover having replied and having confirmed that the House still cooperates, I put the question that this House adopts a report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the Auditor General's report on the financial statements for the national government for the financial year ended 30th June 2015, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, November 14, 2018, subject to A, deletion of recommendation number Roman 2, appearing on page 18 under paragraph 4, in brackets, pending bills, and substituting therefore the following. New Roman 2. The accounting officer, Dr. Kamau Thuge, puts in place measures to forestall the accumulation of pending bills at the National Treasury, contrary to the provisions of Section 12, subsection 2, paragraph B of the Public Finance Management Act 2012, which mandates the National Treasury to ensure proper management and control of and accounting for the finances of the national government and its entities, efficient and effective use of budgetary resources at the national level. B, deletion of the committee recommendation under paragraph 5, in brackets, outstanding interests, appearing on page 19 of the report and substituting therefore the following. In quotes, the accounting officer, Dr. Kamau Thuge, puts in place measures to manage interests and ensure outstanding interests are surrendered on time in line with the provisions of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Regulation 93 of the Public Finance Management, in brackets, National Government Regulations 2015, close the brackets. C, deletion of recommendation number 1 under committee recommendations under paragraph 375.1, in brackets, retention of funds, Kenya shillings 881,398,162.91 on page 466 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. 1, The Auditor General, too, within 3 months after the adoption of this report, undertake an audit into the payments of Kenya shillings 292,060,779.51 and Kenya shillings 100,372,341.65 for financial year 2013-2014 and financial year 2014-2015 respectively, totaling Kenya shillings 392,433,121.16, made by the then accounting officer, Engineer John K. Mosonik, without original receipts. The Auditor General should also undertake a further audit into refunds totaling Kenya shillings 55,450,449.02 in financial year 2014-2015, paid by the then accounting officer to contractors without proof of completion of works contrary to the Public Finance Management Act 2012. D, deletion of recommendation number 1 under committee recommendations under paragraph 375.2, brackets, unresolved issues for deposits account for financial year 2012-2013 and earlier years on page 467 of the report, and substituting therefore the following. 1, the Auditor General, 2, within 3 months after the adoption of this report, undertake a further audit regarding the statement of assets and liabilities and the deposits for the former Ministry of Roads submitted by the then accounting officer, Engineer John K. Mosonik, that was still reflecting the debit and credit balances relating to the financial year 2012-2013 and earlier years, which besides being uncleared for a long time and remained unanalyzed and unsupported as of 30th June 2016. E, deletion of the committee recommendation contained in paragraph 395.2 of the report and substitution thereof with the following new recommendation, and I quote, the Auditor General, to within 3 months after adoption of this report, undertake further audit in order to establish the circumstances in which restricted tendering was adopted in the construction of a model county office in Embu by the State Department of Environment and Natural Resources during the financial year 2014-2015, close the brackets. F, deletion of the committee recommendation contained in paragraph 395.5 of the report and substitution thereof with the following new recommendation, which I quote, the Auditor General, to within 3 months of the adoption of this report, undertake further audit on the propriety of using restricted tendering for fencing projects at various meteorological projects by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources during the financial year 2014-2015. G, deletion of the committee recommendation contained in paragraph 395.7 of the report and substitution thereof with the following new recommendation, which I quote, the Auditor General, to within 3 months after adoption of this report, undertake further audit on the propriety of contracts to various suppliers to supply seedlings to various destinations by the State Department of Environment and Natural Resources during the financial year 2014-2015. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say no? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 11, motion. Ratification of the East African Community Protocol on Information and Communication Technology Networks.
The Chairperson, Committee on Regional Integration. Now, honourable members, I'm not able to know who is in the chamber and who is taking an early weekend. The Chairperson, Committee on regional integration. Who is it? Who? Is it Honorable the Vice Chair? Sorry, the Vice Chair to that committee. I'm told that the chairperson is the recently wedded Lesunda and Isula and could be enjoying the nuptials soon after celebrating a wedding, which I think we must encourage as a house. I hope the Vice Chair has also not joined her to. Who's the Vice Chair? I think the Vice Chair is not, is above that age. There's nobody. Very well, we'll start it down, but whether or not it's be moved today, the resolution of the House relating to this particular motion is that it will be done for a period of 1 hour. It's just that I've seen a member walking in who I know has been an active member of that committee, but these days prefers to, I think since the discovery of oil, most of the time I think he's dealing with oil matters. Is that member for Turkana North? Or some the Honorable Christopher Nakuleu. These days he prefers to sit very far. Anyhow, the motion is stood down. We proceed to the next order, which is the resumption of debate, interrupted on Wednesday 28th, yesterday afternoon sitting. Next order.
Order number 12, the Capital Markets Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 19 of 2018.
Who was on the floor? Very well, honored members, debate on this motion about the Capital Markets Authority and commenced. The mover moved, and it was seconded. The question had just been proposed. So it is debate by any member desiring to contribute. And I say from the list here, the member for Funyula.
Mr. Speaker, sir, sorry for that. We are doing consultation. I didn't intend to contribute on this bill. I wanted to contribute on the next. Sorry for the mix-up, sorry.
Very well. The next one on that, the list is the member for Suba North, Odhiambo Akoth. That must be the Honorable Millie Odhiambo. But has constantly changed name. I think every parliamentary term. Member for Suba North, you may have to teach the new members this trick, which you use every parliamentary time. You have different official names.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It may be the reason why you are re-elected at every time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have looked at the Capital Markets Bill. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to comment on it at this time. I will be bringing my amendments at the third reading. However, I actually had my contributions on the one on the treaties. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I wish to support but bring my amendments at the Committee of the Whole House.
Very well, except you did not tell the new members the trick.
Mr. Speaker, I can give them the tricks. You must have about 6 names. One is, like for me, there is Geza, Millie, Grace, Akoth, Odhiambo. I think there are about 7. So you put different ones so that you confuse the speaker. So today he gives Honorable Millie, tomorrow Odhiambo, the next day Akoth, the next one Geza. And Mabona.
Well, the next one is the Honorable, the member for Kiharu. Didi Nyoro.
I am here, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I support, Mr. Speaker, the motion, but I would want to point out some few matters in regards to the state of the capital market in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, it is notable that for the last several years, Mr. Speaker, most of the players in the stock market currently in the capital markets have actually been making losses. Because the stock market in Kenya currently is shrinking, we are having more companies delisting from the Nairobi Securities Exchange than the companies that are actually, Mr. Speaker, going through the listing. And because of this, Mr. Speaker, we have seen even the volumes and the turnovers in the stock market going down. Basically, one, because the size of the companies listed, Mr. Speaker, is actually now below 60. Just this year, Mr. Speaker, we are currently actually going through a delisting of a company called Uga Group. Mr. Speaker, there are live news currently of a company called Keno, Mr. Speaker, which is a listed company, and it's being bought by a French company, Mr. Speaker, and will actually go through the same fate, Mr. Speaker, of delisting or exiting from the stock market. Mr. Speaker, I can authoritatively tell you, Mr. Speaker, that even our CMA, the Capital Markets Authority, are sleeping on their job, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to promoting the capital markets, and specifically the stock market, as an avenue of investment. Mr. Speaker, the information level in regards to investing in the capital markets in Kenya is very low. And Mr. Speaker, that is one of the reasons why possibly we are having very few players engaging and trading in the stock market in Kenya. The other one, Mr. Speaker, and this is also a challenge to the Capital Markets Authority, which is charged in terms of promoting also our domestic capital markets. That, Mr. Speaker, other actually than trading in shares, other than issues, things like T-bills, that is treasury bills, and bonds, Mr. Speaker, we don't have elaborate many products when it comes to capital markets. Because the basis of a capital market anywhere, Mr. Speaker, beyond investing, is also to help companies to raise capital, either through IPOs or through other methods, Mr. Speaker. But our capital markets here in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, we don't have as many products as many other economies of our scale, Mr. Speaker. And this is a challenge also to our CMA, that they look beyond. Things like private equity, Mr. Speaker, things like venture capital, Mr. Speaker, is actually almost unregulated in Kenya. That you can actually open shop, become a private equity fund, and Mr. Speaker, in terms of regulation, is actually very scanty insofar as CMA, Capital Markets Authority, is concerned. But of note, Mr. Speaker, we also have to promote the privatization of the private public companies, because as it is now, even the companies that are listed in the Nairobi Securities Exchange, their genesis, Mr. Speaker, was actually GOK. Some of these entities were GOK owned. Even one of the biggest, actually the biggest company in Kenya, in terms of market capitalization and in terms of profitability, Safaricom, actually conducted an IPO in way of selling a stake that was previously owned by government. And Mr. Speaker, I see so many candidates in terms of companies that should go through the same fate. One, of course, to increase efficiency in terms of how these companies are run, Mr. Speaker, but more importantly, even to put some heat, Mr. Speaker, and to add it to the companies that are listed in the NSC, Mr. Speaker, to increase activity and to give investors and the Kenyan populace, Mr. Speaker, avenues and options of investing. Companies like KPC, Mr. Speaker, highly profitable, but they can do much more if they are listed. Companies even like this SGR, Mr. Speaker, and so many other entities, Kenya Meat Commission, and so many others in terms of hundreds that should actually be listed and realize better value, one for GOK, number two for themselves in terms of efficiency, and more importantly, to give an array of options to the Kenyan people onto where they can put their money in terms of investments. We can learn from many economists, Mr. Speaker, from the US and ETC, issues like derivatives, Mr. Speaker. We were actually to start a derivatives market in Kenya a few years ago. It is, Mr. Speaker, still in the books. It has never seen fruition. Mr. Speaker, we need to add more products to our capital markets, and we need to do more promotion, even more than regulation. Because what we are having now, Mr. Speaker, is very few players that are making actually no money because the market is currently shrinking in terms of NSC. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
But answering the member for Kitui Central, but what's your point of order before the member for Kitui Central takes?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to go on record. I actually thought that I was moving amendments on this, but I will not be bringing any amendments on this one.
On the CMA.
Just for records.
Okay, good. It's good. That's good to put the record straight. Thank you. Dr. Makali?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me also make a contribution to this bill, which to me appears to be a very straightforward bill. And at the same time, Mr. Speaker, is addressing a very important matter when it comes to capital markets. Mr. Speaker, despite what Honorable Nyoro has said, the Kenyan capital market actually assessed as some of the one of the most robust in this region. But when you compare it with the outside international capital markets, Mr. Speaker, you find we are not doing very well. And the essence of this bill is basically to focus more on people who take advantage of capital markets where they have what we call insider information. That because you operate with the market, Mr. Speaker, you have much more information than anybody else, and then you take advantage of that information either to benefit institutions or individuals in terms of price differentials, Mr. Speaker. And when you look at this bill, Mr. Speaker, it is trying to introduce some penalties for such a people. That if you have such an information and you take advantage, Mr. Speaker, then you need to be punished because you are giving some either individuals or institutions undue advantage, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this is generally a common problem in this country. Mr. Speaker, we have seen people who invest in companies in terms of buying shares. And immediately they sell their shares at the Capital Markets Authority. Once they dispose of their shares, Mr. Speaker, immediately you start seeing such a company starting experiencing problems, meaning that they're actually conning Kenyans. Since you have inside information that the company is going through problems, you want to dispose your shares, get your money and make your profits, and then the company collapses after you have immediately done that. This has been seen, Mr. Speaker, in areas like National Bank of Kenya, where major investors would sell their shares, and immediately they do that, the company starts experiencing financial challenges. And Mr. Speaker, I think this is very important that if an individual or an institution in this country is seen to be taking advantage of what we call insider information, Mr. Speaker, then this House has a mandate and the responsibility to legislate so that such people are punished, to make sure that they don't sabotage the economy. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of also where the capital market seems to be not very stable, Mr. Speaker. And I like what Honorable Nyoro has said, where most companies now are deregistering, and as a result of that, they collapse, and not much is happening in these markets. So I think, Mr. Speaker, in terms of management of these markets, even though we are said to be the best in the region, I think we need really to pull up our socks. We need to have the directors and people in charge of these markets doing much more research to make sure that they provide products, Mr. Speaker, which benefit Kenyans, products which generate income for Kenyans, and more so, and more important, Mr. Speaker, products which would make Kenyans
buy shares as a way of mobilizing resources for investment. Because unless we mobilize resources for investment, Mr. Speaker, you realize that Kenya as a country, what we call our savings levels, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are not very good at saving, generally. Most of our people are just, it's more of a consumer economy, Mr. Speaker. So if we are able to generate more savings through this market, Mr. Speaker, that would be important in terms of generating resources for people to invest. This could also easily affect issues like interest rates. Because if we have more money for giving to our people to invest, Mr. Speaker, it means the demand will reduce as it is today, and this is likely to affect interest rates in terms of reducing interest rates for Kenyans, making borrowing cheaper, Mr. Speaker. So with those remarks, I want to support these amendments, and I say that we move forward, Mr. Speaker, this bill, if it becomes an act of parliament, it will go a long way in assisting Kenyans and helping this country grow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, of course, I can see the. Sorry, I know the Honorable Odo had already said that he didn't want to contribute to this. Who is the mover? Because there's no other member desirous of contributing to this. Member for Nambale. You wanted to contribute to this one, capital markets? Very well. No, don't worry, just speak. You already have the mic.
I do have the mic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I just wanted to support the bill. A well-functioning capital markets is extremely important for directing the investment process. It's also important for deepening the participation of the general public in the process of development through what is a quasi-financial intermediation, deepening of the financial reach out to the people. Mr. Speaker, sir, a well-functioning market will help us to increase the monetization of our economy. That instead of keeping our resources in cattle, for example, and other assets, we can put this in money terms. The advantage being that in money terms, you increase the multiply effect in the economy. You do so without assuming the full risk because it's dispersed broadly through the capital markets, and the collective risk management enables and gives courage to individual savers whose resources become quickly transmitted into investment. Mr. Speaker, sir, a good working capital market has replaced, as you have seen, when the Nairobi capital markets, the Kenyan capital markets began to take root, we have moved away from a highly planned economy in which we assumed that it's the public that's going to direct the public processes that will direct the pace and development of the economy. We have found that, in fact, if we transferred these capacities to capital markets, they are much better in guiding investment in response to market requirements than the old planned processes used to work. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think that these amendments will go a long way to strengthen this very critical institution in our setup in this country. Just one additional word I'd like to add, though, that the adherence to the rule of law, the respect for contracts that then builds trust in the system is extremely important for the functioning of capital markets. Institutions that participate in and are part of the active processes of capital markets need to report accurately on their status and financial status particularly, but that management and leadership there has to be above reproach, or should be seeking to be above reproach. If we operate in a highly ethnicized, nepotistic system, these kinds of institutions don't work very well. I think that we need to professionalize management, and as management is professionalized, then people will have trust that they'll be acting, the leaderships and the management will be acting in the best interests possible. Mr. Speaker, sir, we've talked a lot about issues, related issues of equity and borrowing. That's how the issues of bank borrowing and interest rates become really important. But with a vibrant capital market, reliance on debt as the means of financing is sort of reduced. In fact, it can be so reduced that those with surplus resources are the ones that provide us the capital with which we develop. And the bankers and the banking is also important, but it won't be the center stage. It will also reduce, I guess, our reliance on family sources of financing, where people do not have viable sources of family financing. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support these proposed amendments, and I do hope that they become law once this House passes them. With those few remarks, I support, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Well, there being no other member desirous of contributing to this bill or debate on the bill, I therefore call upon the mover to reply, the Honorable Limo, the chair of the committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I stand here to reply, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the members who have contributed. I equally want to also thank the Office of the Speaker and the Clerk, as well as the members of the Committee on Finance and National Planning for the support during the processing of this bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a very important bill, and I really urge members to take time to read again and look forward to contributing to the amendments during the third reading, Mr. Speaker, because this bill is going to ensure that our investors are safe, and it is going to make Kenya one of the most attractive destination for investors in the region, Mr. Speaker. I stand to reply, and I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to request you under Standing Order 53.3 that a question to this particular bill be deferred and put in another sitting, Mr. Speaker.
But that's just for the putting of the question. Honorable Limo.
Mr. Speaker, I've requested under Standing Order 53.3 that the question be deferred to another sitting.
No, it doesn't even have to. If you have replied, the rest, the chair is supposed to ascertain. And I can announce without any fear of contradiction, having ascertained how many of us are here, the question will be put on Tuesday. Perfect. Tuesday afternoon, question to be put. Next order.
Order number 13, the Circle Societies Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of 2018. Second reading.
Honorable Limo.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity again, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the Circle Societies Amendment Bill 2018 now be read a second time, and I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that this particular bill was as submitted by the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury during the proposals announced in the budget 2018-2019. This particular bill is one of the consequential amendment bills which come during the finance bill, and therefore they are the small babies which follow finance bill which we passed in the House some month ago. Mr. Speaker, this bill is one of the is among three bills, namely Insurance Amendment Bill and the Capital Markets Authority Bill, which you have just done a reply to, Mr. Speaker. And this bill is fairly a small bill, and I want to make it very clear to the House that you must have realized that there have been several amendments to the SACCO Act, and this one should not be confused with another bill. There is another SACCO bill, which is, I think, should be SACCO Bill 2017 or thereabout, which is being transacted in the House, together with some clauses which were appearing in miscellaneous amendment bill. This one is very specific, which was proposed by the National Treasury. And this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, is actually for the purpose of providing the usage of ICT in collecting and receiving statutory reports. I think, Mr. Speaker, this is in recognition that Kenya is among the best countries in the world now in embracing ICT. Instead of using manual in filing returns and statutory reports, this bill now will allow SACCOs flexibility in filing returns to SASRA and any other statutory body. Because currently they are still in the old way of filing reports. They have to sign reports, deliver booklets, bind booklets. Now, this bill will provide flexibility, and the SACCOs will now be able to file their reports faster, efficiently, and accurately. Because, you know, if you have a software in your SACCOs, and you are able to just to process by pressing a button, you are able to process statutory reports, and again, on pressing a button, that report is uploaded to an electronic system, which will then transmit it directly to a statutory body, which SACCOs are required to file such reports. Mr. Speaker, the bill also is, of course, is also a housekeeping bill to the current SACCO bill, because, you know, after the new constitution came into being, there are still terms which are still being used, which are referring to the old way of operation, including but not limited to issues like the cabinet secretary. The current SACCO bill is still referring to as a minister. They are also in clause 3. Clause 3 is seeking to align the county assembly to the current constitution, because, you know, the current SACCO bill is still referring to, instead of saying county assemblies, they're still referring to it as a local authority. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, on clause 3, members will realize that just a change of name. Mr. Speaker, the bill also on clause 4 seeks to recognize the office of the Controller and Auditor General, which was changed because previously it used to be referred to as Auditor General during the times of the long-serving Auditor General, who was, I think, when we were still in school, Mr. Speaker, we used to know Auditor General was only Njoroge. We didn't know any other.
I thought Honorable Limo.
Yes.
It is vice versa. In the older days, it was Controller and Auditor General, but under the new constitution, we have a Controller of Budget, separate, and then Auditor General. I think that.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
The current one, the current now situation is Auditor General.
Yeah,
not Controller and Auditor General.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think you know English. We were told. I think we were told. I don't know, Kiswahili came with the ship and English came with the plane, And you know, some of us did not even fly before we started working. Mr. Speaker, I think you are correct. It is, this bill seeks to change the name from the old name of Njoroge's time, where it was being referred to as the Controller and Auditor General, which is being changed to Auditor General. So members, you can excuse me for that, and you can actually now recognize the right word to use. Mr. Speaker, the bill also seeks to provide for SACCOs a way. There is an issue of SACCOs who do not comply with the regulations, and therefore it also provides for the processes on how registration of SACCOs is done, and how the licenses are revoked, and also it recognizes the process of a tribunal when there is a dispute. Mr. Speaker, it is also, the bill is trying to bring in the role of the Cabinet Secretary to the tribunal. Currently, Mr. Speaker, when there is a dispute, the disputes are handled by SACCO tribunals. But this bill is proposing that the Cabinet Secretary comes into the role of deciding what the authority, which is, when you talk about authority is referred to as SASRA. Once the SASRA has decided, the tribunal then can reverse or can vary the decision of the authority. But now the Cabinet Secretary is is being brought into this particular bill. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a very small bill. It doesn't have a lot of issues, Mr. Speaker. It's purely the objective of this bill is actually to introduce ICT, the use of ICT, as well as housekeeping, cleanup to the current SACCO Act. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to also inform the members that though this bill was introduced by the Cabinet Secretary, in recognition that SACCOs fall in this House under the Committee on Trade and Industry, the decision was made that this bill is taken through public participation by the Committee on Trade and Industry, led by Honorable Kanini Kega, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, it will not, I want to make it clear so that it will not cause confusion, because, you know, at the end of the day, that particular committee will tell us what issues came up during public participation, because they were the ones who did the public participation bit. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by saying that I really thank the committee for working hard around these particular issues which are raised by this bill, and that I am very sure we have had discussion with Honorable Kanini Kega, who is the chairperson of the Committee on Trade and Industry, and there will be some issues which will be amended during the committee of the whole House. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and I invite Honorable Kanini Kega, the chairperson of the Committee on Trade.
The member for Kieni, Kega Kanini. That's the name appears as Kega Kanini. James Madenge.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today you are in the mood of calling us by all our names, which is very good. Thank you. There are some who have realized that my name is also James Mathenge. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for this opportunity. I rise to second this important bill. But from the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it's not a big bill, or it's not quite a number of amendments that need to be done on this bill, but also hasten to say that it is not the bill that has brought a lot of contention. There is a bill that is already with us in the miscellaneous amendment, which of course has created a lot of heat, and I believe that one should be coming by next week. So I want to make it very, very clear that this bill or this amendment is not the one that has many issues. As a committee, we have been able to go through it, and we have submitted a report to this House, of course with a few amendments, which of course will come through as we do the third reading or the committee of the whole House. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, it's also good to note that this is a third bill that is attempting to amend the same act. And as a committee, we have been, sometimes we felt that it would have been better if this bill is reviewed in a holistic way rather than bringing piecemeal amendments here and there, because 3 amendments in one act in the same House, of course, is not very good. However, as a committee, we have taken it positively, and we have been able to interact, of course, with the stakeholders. We interacted with the ministry and also the stakeholders, and we are in agreement in most of the issues that have been raised here. As the mover has clearly said, it is more of a housekeeping issue and also aligning the act with the Constitution as promulgated in 2010. And most of the issues is to actually, for example, remove the issue like members of parliament or MCAs from being members of a board, removal of the control of budget in the audit matters, also removing a second schedule that is being referred to and does not exist, but also fundamentally saying that creating an ICT platform whereby audit matters will be read through ICT platform, which of course is very, very critical as we move forward. It helps in terms of timeliness. Reports will be able to be submitted in real time. And of course, in that one will also improve efficiency in how cooperatives and SACCOs operate. Mr. Speaker, it is also important to note that SACCOs control over assets in excess of 1 trillion shillings. And they have deposits of over 500 billion shillings. And of course, in this kind of a sector, without prudent management, then investors or people who have deposited money in those SACCOs tend to lose their savings. And it has happened in the country. We are also happy that the committee, through the other amendments, we have been able to put in place measures to make sure that those people or those officers who are charged with or the responsibility to run the SACCOs do them diligently and avoid the kind of losses that we have been seeing before. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go beyond that because most of the issues were actually dealt by the mover, but say that this bill, again, is that it doesn't have a lot of issues, but the small issues we will be able to prosecute them when we will have the committee of the whole House. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second.
Honour members, I propose the question, which is that the SACCO Societies Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of 2018, be now read a second time. Honour members, I'm aware that I've been following what members have been. I see very many members have interest in this one. Well, obviously, the member for Funyula is the first.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to support the bill, and I must declare I'm a member of the Committee of Trade, Industry and Cooperative. My chairman has ably stated the issues at hand. I just want to add a few comments here and there to put the matters right. As a committee, we feel that the piecemeal amendments being done to the Cooperative Societies Act and the SACCO Societies Authorities Act are becoming too many and inconsistent, to an extent are going to mutilate the founding laws that govern the cooperative movement in this country. Of course, we hope the ministry, in the fullness of time, without much delay, in consultation with the Council of Governors, will initiate a process of completely overhauling the two acts that support and govern the cooperative movement in this country. We must appreciate the cooperative movement plays a critical role in this country in view of the lackluster performance of the banking industry. We now rely mostly on the cooperative movement to raise capital for purposes of conducting businesses and business expansion. As a committee, we listened to quite a number of stakeholders, including the ministry, the relevant authorities, the CUSCO, and all other umbrella bodies related to the cooperative and the SACCO business. And now most of them were in complete support of the minor amendments being done on this bill at this particular time, and we were informed is essentially to align the bill to the Constitution, the change dispensation, and in view of the finance or budget statement. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have looked at the act, or the bill, so to speak, and we note quite a few things will require to be amended. First of all, I must commend the ministry to consider introducing ICT in the reporting by cooperatives or SACCO societies. This is in line with amendments that we made on the DT SACCO and the need to share intelligence information on creditworthiness of the members, of the borrowers from the SACCO. We do believe now with the ICT-enabled reporting, we will now have real-time reports so that members and any other interested parties can access that information at any given time. We note in the bill, under clause 9, that introduces section 53A, provides that the authority may establish and operate an electronic filing system for the purpose of electronic filing of the statutory returns and documents or other information required to be furnished to authority under the Act or any other written law. The import of that statement or the import of that proposal is that it's not mandatory that all SACCO societies must file their returns through electronic system. Thus, the use of the word may. We do believe the drafters of the bill did so in view that we have so many SACCOs, smaller SACCOs, in probably areas, in locations where network is poor. Just as we saw in the last election, where we could not transmit election results electronically for the simple reason that there was only, 1G or 0G network in that particular area. We hope with the modernization of the ICT sector, with the fiber cables being laid out in all parts of the country, it will become mandatory that all SACCOs file their returns through the electronic system. Mr. Speaker, sir, the second issue that we require to look at it is that now it's becoming a legislative practice that the discretion to set fines, to set any penalties, is not a particular person, but we do so through the regulations. So we require to be amended in order to align it with the general practice. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a provision in the bill relating to the revocation of the license and the process that is involved in seeking appeal for the same. We look at it, when we look at the original act, both the Cooperative Societies Act and the SACCO Societies Act provides that any appeal arising out of a decision to revoke the license of a SACCO must be held or must lie with the minister. It seems those who are drafting the SACCO Societies Act, it was a typo, and therefore this particular bill seeks to correct that typo, to remove the word tribunal and insert the word cabinet secretary. As I conclude my submission, Mr. Speaker, it is a plea to all managers, all significant directors of SACCOs and SACCO societies to take extra care to protect the funds of the people of Kenya who heartily and without reservation invest in these SACCOs. I'm aware there are quite a number of SACCOs currently that are having financial strains, remittance by the employers. There are quite a number, probably it's not the appropriate forum to name them, but I want to ask that as we go along, we need to tighten the laws to make it punitive and extremely expensive for any employer to refuse to remit deductions made on behalf of the employee for the purposes of remitting. Speaker, sir, the issue at hand here, that the cooperative movement, to interfere with the cooperative movement, and that's why we hope the miscellaneous amendments that touches on the cooperative society will be dealt with accordingly at the right time. With those few remarks.
The Honorable Mugambi Gishuki, member for Thai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support. Mr. Speaker, we know that SACCOs in this country control a very big part of wealth of this country. And Mr. Speaker, adjusting the laws so that environment will nurture them and support them so that they continue expanding. We know that SACCOs today are the best rising savings in this country, Mr. Speaker. And going forward, we have to make sure that the Speaker, we have almost over 30% of the resources in this country are the SACCOs. Mr. Speaker, we have 14 million Kenyans who are the SACCO movement. And therefore is a very strong movement that we cannot afford to ignore. Mr. Speaker, we have to even do more. We have to do more, and I do appeal to the relevant committees to come and the SACCOs, because, Mr. Speaker, in some cases, some of them seem to be outdated. We have very strong government involvement in SACCOs when we all know that most of the businesses at the SACCOs are private businesses. They are private businesses, Mr. Speaker, because they are operating at the certificates of incorporations, only that they operate at the guarantee other than limited liability, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we have to bring up laws that are supportive to SACCOs more as private businesses than government businesses. I say this with knowledge, Mr. Speaker, that we have some businesses where even the commissioner of cooperative sits in boards as an entitlement when they are private businesses. And therefore, it has become very difficult.
For that development, potential development of secondary markets, that will be able now to take these resources to much higher level, we will begin to grow from accurate reporting, from transparent reporting, from computerized reporting. We have examples, for example, in Denmark, but in Holland, in which institutions that have been born out of cooperatives and SACCO-type institutions now are major financial players in their respective countries and globally. So it is possible that, in fact, for millions of Kenyans who may not get the advantage to go in the big banks, and you know, some years back, some big banks closed their branches around rural Kenya, saying that that was not a viable area until, I like to say, without any fear of contradiction, equity came on board. And then they realized, oh no, you can actually raise huge money and become successful. They all rushed back, not just in front of in front on workers' desks and so on. Does in fact have workers' desks and so on. Does in fact have a fundamental, transformative possibilities for this movement. I am saddened greatly that simultaneously, as we speak, contemporaneously, I would say, in the sense that it's about the same time, there are 3 amendments floating, clearly representing different interest groups in this movement. That must be dealt with. I know we have all, and I know they are listening, we have all pleaded that this should now be consolidated by overhauling the entire act with all these amendments put in so that it's streamlined. But that should be a cause for concern. But, we are not legislating in vain by dealing with piecemeal things, good individually, but collectively we will not have dealt with the totality of what is needed to move this movement forward. It's a good thing to do, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I support it wholly. Thank you very much.
Very good contribution. But the Honorable Bunyasi, I think the one you allude to, that there was some back and forth from the Cabinet Secretary, was the amendment that were proposed to the miscellaneous amendment bill that we dealt with a week or 2 weeks ago. But good contribution. We'll have a contribution from the Honorable Kioni, member for Ndaragwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity you've given me to contribute to this important debate. And I want to start by saying that without doubt, one of the aims of this bill, and it has been mentioned in the memoranda, is to align it to our Constitution of 2010. And allow me, Mr. Speaker, to say that this is enough evidence that the work of implementing the Constitution is way, or there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. We are not anywhere near completion. We have had many of these pieces of registration that keep coming, and what is clear is that many of our ministries have never taken pain to ensure that the statutes that fall under them were aligned to the Constitution. Parliament, 10th Parliament, 11th Parliament, and even now 12th Parliament did their bit by enacting new legislation to implement the Constitution, or to help in the implementation of the Constitution. But without doubt, there are still very many pieces of registration that still need to be, one of the things that we should never try to do is to amend the Constitution to implement the Constitution. We should do laws to implement the Constitution, but we should not amend the Constitution to implement the Constitution. If you want to amend the Constitution to implement the Constitution, in my opinion, and as the chairman of CIOC, you will need a referendum. The people who give you that Constitution, you must ask them when you want to amend it to implement it, and perhaps in the manner that, perhaps, let me leave that debate. I don't want to start a debate that might not be having a lot of room for it today, but we'll continue with it, and we will help in the coming times if we are given that opportunity. But let me say that this bill that we have, without doubt, is a short bill, and you can actually tell, because the memorandum is also short, just to align it with the Constitution and perhaps provide for the ICT. But the question that begs for an answer is what becomes of all the other sections in the old bill. So what the colleagues are saying that we need a complete overhaul or a complete look at that bill or the act so that we are able to be confident with what we are doing is correct, and I want to support it. We said the same thing when we are dealing with the health bill, that bill was not doing justice to all the pieces of registration that we were making at the one blanket, because you don't feel like you have exercised your mind adequately on that. But again, we have to do what is before us. And what is before us is to support this bill on the SACCO, and we want to commend the committee that has brought before us. I want to say that I like the provisions that are in it. Every single day or every other month, we have new SACCOs being formed. It is the way of life in the rural areas, and it is only important, it's only fair that we are seen to give that part of our sector some attention. We have very many table banking groupings in our constituencies, and they have grown to the level that they would want to go to the next level. One of the levels they are going to is a SACCO. They are going to this cooperative movement. And it's important that we continue engaging ourselves and trying to help them to make sure that they grow. Some of us who are not very old will remember that back in the 80s and perhaps 90s, and more of it in the 80s and late 70s, there was a very strong movement, cooperative movement, and especially in the Mount Kenya region. But through some political, I think you call them political tsunamis that hit the area, all these cooperatives went under. And the way of life of people was completely disrupted. To date, some of them have never found a footing again. And it's because the cooperative movement then may have been interfered with politically, because there might not have been any regulatory framework that would have guarded the SACCOs and also shielded them from political interference. And this bill, among others that have been done before, goes a long way to ensuring that such maneuvers, political maneuvers, are not done in the coming days. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that comes out clearly in for my attention is the section 45, which talks about the qualification of external auditors. This helps to introduce professionalism in the way that these SACCOs are audited, ensuring that there is no insider trading, but also at the same time, creating a lot of employment for the young people back in the rural areas, because you now can be able to go and engage yourself fully from the first of the month to the end of the month, just by doing audit of SACCOs in the rural areas. So it is a bill that we want, the procedure for revoking licenses and how it should be done, the way to apply for a license, and even the way to set or to limit the audited accounts. All of that covered in this bill help to improve the quality and the way of doing things within the SACCOs. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support and thank the committee for the work they have done, and encourage them and other committees that as members of CIOC, we are talking to all the ministries, Mr. Speaker, because implementation of the Constitution is really a wide thing. It covers every area. So any committee that fights their ministry coming before us, it is to help the country, not to take up their job. In any case, there's so much work to do in this country. You cannot finish it for the few months that you are here as a member of 12th Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
The Honorable Kioni, I don't envy you. You are Herculean task of heading that huge committee, constitutional implementation. And of course, you have said here today that implementation of the Constitution is not a destination. It is a journey that we must journey through forever. Very well. Very well. The Honorable Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to make comment on this very important piece of legislation, bill, which is actually very small, but I end up speaking, Honorable Speaker, with my second voice, which is very, very low and very reasonable, because of late we have had about 3 bills just touching on the same issue of the cooperatives. And some of them do come like small amendments, but when you look deep inside them, they have a heavy weight with interests that are not necessarily for the cooperative movement. So I spend most of the time, Honorable Speaker, today just going through this particular bill and also consulting the very many stakeholders about it. And I want to thank the chairman, because I also consulted him much earlier yesterday and today, and he assured me that this is not part of the many small legislations that are coming around with interests that are not for the cooperative movement. And indeed, I've confirmed that. I want to say the cooperative movement is a very important movement for the workers of Kenya, the teachers of Kenya, the civil servants of Kenya, the farmers, like Honorable Kioni has said. And Honorable Kioni, I want to assure you that for many years when we grew up, we admired the cooperative movement in your areas. But later on, they collapsed and we don't know what really happened. But I want to inform the House and Honorable Kioni that what used to happen in your areas is now happening in our area. There's a lot of mad rush, quick rush for formation of cooperatives. And the worrying is that we don't know if it can go the same direction you have almost alluded to. And therefore, it's very important that we make good laws. We make very good laws that can especially protect the people who invest in these cooperatives, especially when the cooperatives either are mismanaged or they cease to operate well, and the farmers, the people generally lose their benefits. Away from that, Honorable Speaker, I want to say, after having looking at this particular bill, I noticed it was more of procedural issues. That one was dealing with the ICT introduction, which I fully support, because it will enhance efficiency in doing returns and also make sure that these cooperatives work efficiently. But I would want to also comment, and especially I'm happy the chair is back, that along the way, the first people who did cooperatives and the big circles we have in this country, and I come from a background of the teacher circles, which are the biggest in the country. Today, there are many other small circles like the border circles and the matatu circles. I hope that in so doing and introducing the ICT systems in filing reports and doing returns, we shall not completely disadvantage the young ones that are upcoming and are keen also in just making the first step towards developing the cooperative movement in their own areas, like I said earlier. I also want to say, Honorable Speaker, that I also noticed that a lot of the amendments in this particular bill was more of housekeeping elements, touching on the issues of minister and replacing them with CSS. In other places, I noticed clearly it was aligning them with the county government, because it was clear that they were still using the local authority instead of the county assemblies. Honorable Speaker, there was also the issue of the Controller and Auditor General, which I think was very well touched by the mover of the motion, and so well so. And therefore, it is a good bill generally for the cooperatives, and therefore, I would want to support it. I also noticed typos when you write the word cooperative, but I think the clerk's office will deal with that, because there's a way it's written, and here the typos are clearly could clearly be seen. But then moving forward, and especially that now the chair is here, I noticed that on that clause where we are looking at how to make sure that the cooperatives are managed well, and which I fully support, so that we are able to even size the licenses of the cooperatives that are being mismanaged. If a SACCO is being mismanaged, and therefore we withdraw its license, I did not think that there's need completely to close down the cooperative, because many of the SACCOs begin as cooperatives, savings cooperatives. And then later on, when they grow bigger, they introduce what is called the SACCO, the front office. So if the front office fail, which may fail because of several reasons, which I've also had a number of honorable members.
Member for Kigumo. Gary,
Yes.
just come. Yes, you can use that one.
Okay, thank you.
That one. Very well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to support the SACCO Society Amendment Bill number 18 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, the very essence of this bill is to allow for efficiency, to ensure that we institute accurate reporting as the memorandum, the activities of the SACCO. Mr. Speaker, as my colleagues have observed, the SACCO movement has, for a long time, instituted within the Kenyan society a country cannot grow its wealth unless we move not just from CASA has grown in width and bound because they may call it a different name, but actually is the SACCO movement. Savings that are usually put in our SACCOs are for ordinary Kenyans. We want to create wealth that we represent in this and feel even unless it's able to accumulate wealth at the very base where the majority of the people are in the rural areas through such organized institutions like the SACCO. So this bill, then, Mr. Speaker, could not have come at a better time, and that's why I rise to support it. I also want to join the members that have actually said it should have been more comprehensive than it is. And we do hope that that will be looked into and will be brought a more comprehensive bill to the House, although already of an integrated filing system, automated filing system, people, and thereby allow reducing the errors, that human errors that come around, and that the Speaker. So for me, I would want to encourage the committee that was looking into this, look at it more holistically and bring us a more comprehensive bill that will look into all the operation and ensure are protected and they are efficiently managed. In terms of the filing, the efficiency to create and reducing risks. Because when you're looking at money and issues relating to funds, you must be concerned with risk management. So instituting e-filing or computerized filings of documents and reporting to the authority that this bill seeks to institute will also create efficiency, will reduce malpractices in our SACCO system, and create more hope and help the members, have much more faith in managing their SACCOs. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to, with those few remarks, join those who have talked ahead of me to support this bill and to seek that even a more comprehensive one be be done. They've talked about even issues like auditing. Previously, the SACCOs were doing their own auditing and appointing their own auditors without a streamlined method or procedure of auditing. I have seen in this bill now registering auditors who must meet for which, because it sets the four walls within which the SACCOs must then operate. So, Mr. Speaker, I also want to support what Honorable Kioni talked about, asking our government agencies to remove 2010 that demands that all the laws and regulations that govern our institutions, they relook at all their laws and the regulation. This is I beg to support. Thank you.
Member for Tesono. Just before you start your submission, I wish to notify members that I have received communication from the ICT people that the delivery from the mics for members is not very clear for recordal purposes. I'll therefore direct that from now onwards, our members come to make their delivery from the dispatch box, starting with the Honorable Oku Kaunya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity. I stand to support the SACCO Societies Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of 2018. I support this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, for two main reasons. Mr. Speaker, the issue of introducing ICT will bring efficiency and effectiveness in terms of reporting. And not only on reporting, but also in sharing information, which can be available to both members and other organizations that are interested in the SACCOs. This in itself will promote and increase trust among the members. Because one of the things that has let down a number of SACCOs is where information is not shared and it becomes difficult for members to understand, particularly where management of SACCOs goes down, Mr. Speaker. Some SACCOs have failed simply because information is not available to the members as how it is progressing. And introducing ICT will go a long way in improving that sharing of information and the confidence or trust the members will have. Apart from that, this ICT, I do believe, though the bill may not have gone further, I believe that with the inclusion of what we know currently, some of the small servers, Mr. Speaker, sir, like the borders, are those in the informal sector, already make savings. If this ICT use of the mobile or electronic is extended to the mobile money business, where even the savers can actually save from the grassroots, I think this will expand the base, and also it will make it much cheaper for savers to do. Mr. Speaker, I've seen a few of these SACCOs
like the border SACCOs, in some areas are already using the money, the mobile money system linked with the banks, like Equity, for example. I've seen them utilizing that system. They save from home. They don't have to have that money transmitted, or they don't have to go to the bank, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it saves them the cost of moving to where bank branches are. So I think the introduction of ICT generally should actually encompass even other sectors. The second reason I support this bill is the question of, in terms of SACCOs, for us to expand SACCO societies, Mr. Speaker, it will increase the available amount of money to the public, the available amount of money for business, but at a low cost of interest. Because most SACCOs, Mr. Speaker, as you realize, charge very low amount of interest even to the members in terms of acquiring, for example, the loans. So with this, we believe that even the cost of loans will go down as long as we'll have a greater base in terms of coverage. So this particular bill will help in enhancing resource mobilization through these SACCOs. And we believe that even the filing system itself will make it easier for government to monitor, and also for other institutions that they are interested in SACCO performances. For example, those who may be interested in funding or supporting the growth of SACCOs, Mr. Speaker, they will easily access those records, and therefore it will help in enhancing the sector. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you.
We shall proceed in this manner. We shall have the Honorable who look for order, followed by the Honorable Abele Malimo, and then we shall have the mover to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this proposed amendment. The SACCO Societies Amendment Bill 2018, which I support. I would like to start by thanking the Chairman and members of Finance and National Planning Committee for these proposed amendments. Mr. Speaker, as earlier speakers have said, looking at the memorandum on these proposed amendments, most of the amendments are basically aimed at aligning the old act or the principal act with provisions of our new constitution. And I would like to reiterate what the chairman of Constitution Implementation Oversight Committee chair said, that there exist many legislations which are not yet aligned with the provisions of new constitutions, which still makes reference to ministers, still makes reference to local authorities, and so on and so forth. Mr. Speaker, as I support these amendments, proposed amendments, it is important for us to appreciate that SACCO societies have played a very important role in economic development of our country, especially in enabling our rural population and the workers of Kenya, those in public service and private sector, to pull together their savings and therefore through their cooperatives to access affordable financial services. Actually, the role of SACCO societies is appreciated by our Blueprint Vision 2030 in terms of its role in deepening financial access, in mobilizing savings, and also in enabling investments in enterprises and also investments for personal development for members of various SACCOs. Looking at the specifics on the proposed amendments, I specifically want to talk about this Section 51 of the Principal Act, which is proposed to be amended. If you look at the provision of that section, what is provided for in that Principal Act, it relates to role of the authority in terms of its supervisory work, as well as enforcement of action at times when the SACCO societies violate provisions of the Principal Act, as well as other regulations which are put in place to regulate the businesses of SACCO societies. Now, the proposed amendment under Section 51 of the Principal Act, under Section 7, Article 51 M, it relates to imposition of financial penalty on the society. But, Mr. Speaker, we know that these societies are run by directors. They are also run by people who are employed by these directors to manage the savings of Kenyans. And therefore, if we stop at what was provided for under the old act, where the imposition of financial penalty is stopped at, the society as an institution, I think that's not fair. And therefore, the proposed amendment is quite in order. It goes beyond imposition of financial penalty on the society and talks about also doing the same on directors who, under whose watch, the violation of the provisions of the Societies Act has taken place, and therefore putting the savings of Kenyans in jeopardy. And therefore, I see that as a very important thing. We have seen cooperative societies fall, hard-earned savings of Kenyans being squandered by people who have been entrusted by members to manage their savings, and so on and so forth. And therefore, this proposed amendment is going to tighten regulation of the savings. It's also going to discourage, it's going to act as a deterrence for the directors and also for the employees of SACCO societies not to violate, in the process of conducting businesses, not to violate provisions of the SACCO Society Act and other regulations which are in place to guide operation of the SACCO societies. I would like also to appreciate the importance of use of ICT in filing returns. We realize that the manual way of filing returns is cumbersome in terms of, receiving this in a central registry, and sometimes it's difficult for regulatory authorities to establish, the financial health of the thousands and thousands of SACCO societies which are registered to operate across our country. And therefore, I feel that the use of ICT to facilitate electronic filing of the returns is going to improve efficiency. It's also going to help the regulatory authority to identify those SACCOs which probably are not performing well, and therefore institute measures to prevent them from going under. With those few remarks, I support the proposed amendments.
Well, I will follow as the Speaker had directed. Next is Honorable Albert Marimo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this amendment bill, the SACCO Societies Bill of the National Assembly, number 18 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, cooperative societies contribute so much to the economy of this country due to the fact that they play an integral role to promote those Kenyans who really earn very meager salaries, who actually be able to come together in order to put their savings in one basket. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the country today, from in the olden days, when only big banks used to have monopoly in the industry, of the banking industry. And therefore, you will find that quite a number of Kenyans were cut out from actually, because by the time you are required to even register, even to open a bank account, you are told to produce this and this. So the process is made very cumbersome. However, in the introduction of these cooperative societies, for instance, like Kenya Police Service have their members, and therefore they decided to have a cooperative society to take care of their financial management so that members will be able to save their savings there, and eventually they will be able to have, they will be able to have their payment and retirement benefits. At least by the time somebody is retiring, he will be able to have something for himself, having saved. They can also be able to access loans. So, Mr. Speaker, currently we really have quite a number of SACCOs throughout the country who take care of different parastatals. Even we have walimu, even teachers and all that. And that is actually a good sign that people are really trusting these cooperative societies, and it's really helping our people. However, Mr. Speaker, on the side of management of these cooperative societies, you will realize that some cooperatives, they don't have quite a good structure to run these cooperative societies. Simply because somebody might have realized that there's an opportunity here, and he will end up, being appointed as the chair or even the director of that particular cooperative society, and he will have his wife and even his relatives, and eventually, just like we have seen in the past, that some banks, financial institutions like banks, we have seen the banks which have gone under, and the directors happen to take away hard-earned Kenyan money, money from which has been contributed by Kenyan citizens, their hard-earned money, and somebody runs away. So it becomes very difficult for the for the members even to pursue, even for that person to be arrested. So it becomes really a very big, it becomes a mess that that person cannot be able to be held accountable for whatever mismanagement he has caused. So, Mr. Speaker, this proposed amendment, I think it has come at the right time to safeguard, to cushion Kenyan citizens who happen to contribute their money into these cooperative societies, and therefore I think it is really at the right time. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the amendment. Thank you.
Very well. Honorable, is it Honorable Dirango? Yes, please. You have the opportunity to reply.
Mr. Speaker, in replying, I wish to thank both the Committee of Trade, Industrialization and Cooperatives and my own Committee of Planning and Finance for together working collectively to ensure that this bill comes to right. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank all members who have participated in giving their expert views on this bill, Mr. Speaker. It is important to note that quite a number of members here, like the member for Moro, the Honorable Makari Muru, and other members are experts in SACCO development, and they have given very important contributions. Right here in the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, most of our members of Parliament here are also members of PACOSO and BUCOSO, and we know the critical part they play in availing finance to members to develop themselves and to undertake their personal project. Mr. Speaker, there is a clear correlationship between governance, democratic governance, and the operation of cooperatives. Looking around, Mr. Speaker, you see that today, since the new constitution took root, Mr. Speaker, that the government has been trying to create laws and to develop values along the propagation of Sacco societies. As opposed, Mr. Speaker, to the earlier rule of 1980 and the early 1990, when important cooperatives in this country, particularly in central Kenya, were politically undermined and influenced through the office of the Commissioner of Cooperatives then. Mr. Speaker, I have in mind land-buying cooperatives like Nyakenyua, Kehiumwere, Boy Committee, and even very strong banks, Mr. Speaker, that were based on cooperative development, like the former Rural Urban, which was headed by Andrew Goba, Jiba Bank, the former Continental Bank, headed by, among other directors, Kibaki, Akiba Bank, Consolidated Bank. Mr. Speaker, because of bad governance and dictatorship and political manipulation in the management of these companies and cooperatives, they all went under, leading to a lot of desperation among farmers and ordinary Kenyans, particularly in Nairobi, Eastern and Central Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, we want to thank the parent Ministry of Trade and Industrialization for also coming up with a policy to firm up values around the management of SACCOs so that they can be able to serve Kenyans prudently and in the deployment of ICT to manage their reporting, monitoring, record keeping, etc. Mr. Speaker, the archaic system of managing cooperatives is cumbersome and leads to a lot of wastage. So, Mr. Speaker, we look forward to the implementation of this bill so that deployment of ICT can improve the management of SACCOs to bring transparency and accountability. It is also true, Mr. Speaker, that even in this time of ICT, there are many cooperatives out there who are luring members of the diaspora to invest, particularly in land-buying companies. But when you look critically at them, Mr. Speaker, you find that they have invested nothing in ICT. It is important prospective investors, particularly locally and from the diaspora, who want to invest in land-buying companies, to take time to peruse their books, to seek information about the management of these SACCOs. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank our new Minister in Cooperatives, our Honorable Governor Munya, who has taken up the helm at that ministry for also ensuring that together with Parliament, these rules and bill come to bear. With those words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply, and without the risk of preempting you, Mr. Speaker, to seek your indulgence in invoking Rule 53.3 to defer the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We'll go, Honourable Member. That is noted. We shall pend putting the question until we have the required threshold numbers. Next order.
Order number 14, the Insurance Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 21 of 2018. Second reading.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. Honourable Imo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, As I stand to transact the Insurance Amendment Bill 2018, Mr. Speaker, I want to request you and indulge you that this particular bill be stood down until next week, because I received information from the National Treasury that there is some information which needs to be given to us before we move this bill. Mr. Speaker, I ask you to stood down to next week.
Very well, that is stepped down until next week or that other time that the House Business Committee sorts the business again. Next order.
Order number 15, the Assumption of Office of the County Governor Bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2018, second reading.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. And shall I request you, Honorable Chair, to use the dispatch box so that then there isn't the interruption of recording.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security, we wish to table a report on the committee's proceedings during the consideration of the assumption of the office of the County Governor Bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2018. Honorable Speaker, the committee wishes to commend the Senate for coming up with the assumption of the office of the County Governor Bill, which seeks to fill a gap in the law on how governor-elect or respective counties assume office. The proposed bill also provides for the establishment of an assumption of office of governor committee that will ensure that there is a smooth transition where a new governor is elected. Honorable Speaker, in consideration of the bill, the committee has made outstanding amendments to the bill and shall be laying the same in the House at the opportune time. The committee made recommendations as indicated in the report that, 1, there is need to define who a county officer is for clarity purposes, because there is a confusion between a county officer and a public officer. Secondly, there is a need to include the Ministry of Devolution in the assumption of office, the Governors Committee, since that is the ministry responsible for the matters related to the devolution and also offers technical assistance to the counties. Thirdly, Honorable Speaker, there is a need to provide for an instance where a speaker assumes office as an acting governor as per the provisions of Article 182 in bracket 5 of the Constitution. And fourthly, Honorable Speaker, there is a need to provide for a time frame within which a speaker of a county assembly shall assume office as a governor, where vacancy occurs in the office of the governor and the deputy governor. All these issues highlighted, Honorable Speaker, shall be brought by the committee as amendment to the bill. And Honorable Speaker, I believe when these amendments are implemented, they will bring soberness in the county government and also remove the madness that we have been seeing in the county government. We wish to thank the office of the Honorable Speaker and the clerk for facilitating the committee in discharging the mandate. Honorable Speaker, with this I beg to move the report and call upon Honorable Kaunya to second.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Kaunya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I stand to second this Senate Bill number 1 of 2018, the Assumption of Office of the County Governor Bill. This particular bill, as our chairman, the National Administration and Security Committee has indicated, is meant to provide for a procedure for assumption of office of governor and to provide for the ceremonies surrounding it. But basically, the bill is timely, and the bill takes cue from the assumption of office of the president, which is in the Constitution. There were gaps in terms of assumption of office of the governor, and I think this is the main reason why the bill was brought. And we have proposed those amendments already mentioned by the chair, and we believe this should make the process smooth. We should have a smooth process from which the governor takes over when elected. There are, for example, gaps that are sought to be filled in this process. For example, limiting or specifying the time that is required for assumption. Because in the previous case, it was open. It could take so long. And then secondly, also limiting the reporting. When the committee, when the governor takes over, there's always that accountability process from the previous government or the previous governor to the current. There are provisions now that provide for a report to be submitted within a specified time. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second. Thank you.
We will, honorable members, pose a question that the assumption of office of the county governor bill, Senate bill number 1 of 2018, we now read the second time. A number of members are really interested to speak to this. Top on the list is Honorable Akol. That member as well, and it is an interest to speak, and left. Honorable Gary Waniki. The next in the queue is the member speaking now, offline. Honorable Jeremiah Kioni, member for Daragwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me an opportunity to contribute to this very important bill once again. This is a familiar position. This is where everybody used to speak from during 10th Parliament before we created the cubicles that we all have now. But, Mr. Speaker, this is yet another of the bills that is going a long way in implementing our Constitution of 2010. And we want to commend the Senate for the initiative they took. We also want to commend our own committee, led by the able chair, for working on it speedily and allowing us time to debate it and input on its enactment. Mr. Speaker, the issue of assumption of office by the governor is not anything that is new to Kenyans. We all know, including your own county, how this was chaotic, and it is only fair that we provide some order within it, and the bill has helped a long way. It's gone quite some distance to try and sort out the difficulties that were there. One of the things that is clear is that during the assumption of office of the governors, because we had it for the first time, I think this year, was a scenario where the governor who was leaving office, or the governor who was assuming office, was faced with a committee that was trying to help him assume office, and top of the list of those people who were in the committee are those who were campaigning against him. And for the reason that there was no way of identifying, nothing had been provided for, and a person would sit in an office and arbitrarily decide on how to conduct the assumption of office. Now we have a bill that we are confident will become an act of parliament that helps sort out that mess. I think the other thing, Mr. Speaker, that I think is crucial in line with that is that I am hoping that there will be a criteria for the persons who will be in those committees, so that again we don't have people who have just walked in and may not be very useful. But since they are the ones who have just walked in last, are given the opportunity to do so. We need a criteria that clearly represents offices. It is good to note that the amendments are seeking to bring in the office of the minister or the CS as we know them today, so that there is some order and there is some clarity in the way that we handle that issue. The other thing that I hope we will be able to deal with is that the budget for the assumption of office can also be provided for, even if perhaps not in a definite manner, so that we avoid what again we saw during the assumption of office. We had people spending 2, 4, 5, 10 million shillings, while others were spending 200,000 shillings. It will be good to ensure that there is, even if not a specific figure, there is a capping, so that you don't give the Kenyans an impression that another router has been sworn in or has taken charge of the territory. A handing over procedure, even as the governor assumes office, Mr. Speaker, I think it's also important to provide in some form that how do you hand over? As it is now, and it is the case also with our own offices, it's like you walk into an office where people took off in a hurry, either left some papers under the table or left with everything. I think it is important that some handing over procedures, even if not, even it may not be possible for the governor whom you defeated or was defeated to walk in and hand over. You need to be very mature politically. But an officer in his own office who is accountable to the people should be made to hand over, and specific documents that are useful in handing over be included. The role of the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, a very important inclusion in this bill. I know that our Speaker has been a Speaker of the County Assembly, and I'm sure at one point he must have seen himself having the potential of taking over as a governor. But it would have been a disaster then, because there was no clear way of doing it. Now we have a bill that should clarify and make it very clear when a Speaker takes over for this period of time. And I would suggest also, Mr. Speaker, that even the duties or the responsibilities that he can fulfill during that time be very clear. So that you remember when we had the presidential rerun and we had a presidential elect who then became the president because we were back to where we were. There are specific things that the Constitution was curtailing him from doing. We need to be careful and clear what is it that the Speaker can do during that time when we are looking for a governor, so that he doesn't become a governor who may just want to shape the county in a manner that he runs it when he is the Speaker, because when he is acting as the governor, he is still certain of being the Speaker once the governor comes into office. And with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for that opportunity and say that as we continue thinking through this bill and the law of the governors and the devolution, I think we also need to encourage ourselves to understand again that what we were devolving was never political power. I think now we can be able to talk about these things more boldly and in an agreeable manner. When we were doing the constitution, there was a pull and push because people were looking for political power. And we now can see the damage that can be there if you devolve political power to the governor. It is even detrimental to you as a member of parliament. But we wanted to have economic devolution. We devolve units that would help us spur growth of economic, spur some economic growth in our country. And we can tell 1 or 2, 3 counties may already be looking like they are generating some economic activities from where they are. So any registration that we do, in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, should be aimed at helping the governors realize the law that we want. We want them to grow employment from the counties. We want to see a number of the counties, what we are experiencing is unnecessary political competition, unnecessary quarreling, and in the process, really just stagnating growth, and we mark time for another 5 years, which is not useful at all, to a point where, for example, like today, if you ask many of the counties, including where I come from, they will be wanting to tell you, take back this health sector to the national government. Why? Is because the governors have not spent time dealing with the issues that they needed to deal with from the beginning. And so as we continue debating these issues, we need to address ourselves, including an issue that we may have alluded to yesterday, including why is it that we were having nominated members to the county assembly and providing for their way of occupying space in those assemblies in the constitution. It was not for them to be grouped together by the governor and they become a whip against the people who voted. It's because they were supposed to help in actualizing those issues that affect people more, like water, health. There are things that help affect people on a regular basis. And we thought in making the constitution that if we nominate more women at the county assembly level, they will remember the issues that our ladies go through and are suffering from every day. What we are now seeing today is that the first point of call is the governor's office, and they form themselves into a caucus that is then used by the governor to do things that more often than not don't benefit the people who elected the MCs. And let me say this for purposes of clarity. When the governor takes the nominated MCAs and forms them into a group, adds another 5 or 10 who had been elected, he has enough assembly to run the county against the wishes of the many, because those who were voted for will not have a voice in that assembly. So as we continue thinking through of how we nominate people to assembly, you cannot allow a nominated person to come and take up a position contrary to that which not, let me say, you cannot allow a nominated person to even have more power than the person who was given the votes by the people. I think it's a backdoor way of running our country, and we will not achieve what we intended to achieve when we gave ourselves the new constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Next is Honorable Dr. Makari Mungu, member for Kitui Central.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to give my input into this bill. And Mr. Speaker, let me also declare that I'm a member of the committee, of this committee, the Committee on Administration and National Security. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important we thank the Senate for this bill. And as we have always been saying, Mr. Speaker, the reason why the Senate was actually created as a house of this parliament is to be able to serve the interest of the county governments and the county assemblies. And when I see a bill like this, Mr. Speaker, we start appreciating the importance of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, this bill as it has been said by the mover and the seconder, is supposed to provide the procedures on how to assume office once a governor is elected. And Mr. Speaker, we must realize at any point when we conduct elections, there will be the sitting governor and the governor will be elected. There are cases where the sitting governor will win his seat and continue the second term. And there are cases where the governor who is sitting will lose and you have a new person coming in. And I think the importance of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to be able to manage the two scenarios. So that in our case, and more so the scenario whereby a sitting governor has lost an election and we have a new one who is coming. Because if we don't have a clear legal framework, Mr. Speaker, the sitting governor who has lost the election can make life very difficult for the one who has been elected, and settling of the new governor could be a big issue. So that's the importance of this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I would just want to assure Honorable Keoni that what he was raising while making his contribution has been adequately provided in this bill. When you look at clause 5 of this bill, Ms. Honorable Keoni and the other members, it is clearly stated who will sit in this committee which has been set up, and this committee will be titled Establishment of Assumption of the Office of the Governor Committee. There is a committee which has been set up now in law. And when you look at the composition of this committee in terms of membership, Mr. Speaker, the county secretary is number 1. Why is the county secretary number 1? Because county secretary is a civil servant. By expectation, he is not supposed to play any politics. So him being a neutral person, he is supposed to oversee that transition in case a governor loses an election. Then there's the issue of the officer in charge of legal matters in the county. I imagine that's the person who is advising the county in terms of legal matters. The chief officer in the department responsible for matters, county public officer, that's now the public service of the county. The chief officer responsible for matters relating to information and communication. Chief officer, department responsible for finance. Chief officer in the department responsible for matters relating to culture and social services. County commissioner, who is now from the national government. So you see now we are bringing the national government into the whole arrangement so that even the national government is represented. Then we have a representative of the National Intelligence Service, which is critical. A representative of the National Police Service. Clerk of the County Assembly, another important arm of the county government. Then a representative from the judiciary, and 2 persons, 1 man and woman from, nominated by the governor-elect. So we'll have 2 people who the governor-elect will be able to appoint, a man and a woman, to make sure that even as this committee sits, then the particular interest of the governor-elect are mainstreamed into the whole arrangement. And that's what we are, this proposal of the committee is, as we move forward, as we go to the third reading, Mr. Speaker, we'll be bringing on board a representative from the Ministry of Devolution, because it's one overseeing county governments. So that even as this committee sits, then we have somebody from that ministry to make sure that from the word go, things are well organized as we move forward, Mr. Speaker. And that's why to me this is very important, because initially, as Honorable Keoni was saying, you could find that a team could just come and decide to frustrate the governor-elect, and will never settle and waste a lot of time instead of implementing. That's that one area, Mr. Speaker, I thought it's important I mentioned. The other bit which is important in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that in addition to the committee being formed, it is very clear what the committee is expected to do in terms of outputs. We are saying when this committee is formed, these are the expected outputs which will be given to the governor-elect. We are saying one of them, when the governor-elect assumes office, this committee is expected to cease immediately the governor takes office, is supposed to have an up-to-date assets register of the government. It's expected to have an updated register of reliabilities, so that it's clear what is owed to the county government. It's to have a complete list of all bank accounts and reconciled balances, so that these things are in place. It's supposed to also have a report of all staff establishment per department. It's supposed to have a comprehensive report on county entities or corporations or agencies containing information which is as listed above, Mr. Speaker. And then they're also supposed to have an updated report on all pending legal cases, so that when this committee And then last, there's county source of funding. In case where the county government has other sources other than the central government and their own revenue generation, they're supposed to indicate which are those other sources. So that when the governor-elect settles, and he has all these reports, very quickly they can settle and start working. And then the other good thing with this committee is, during the interim time, when you have a governor-elect and a governor who has lost election, this committee is supposed to facilitate smooth communication between the two. You know, at times they don't see eye to eye. So this committee could visit the governor-elect, hear the side of the story, and go to the governor who has lost, hear the story, and then see how they can, that smooth communication, so that county activities do not suffer as a result of that. So the bill makes provision for that, Mr. Speaker, and I think that is quite important. The other thing which is also is provided for here is the governor-elect, once declared as a winner, is supposed to be provided with security. We know this country, people have suffered after you are elected. If you don't have adequate security, Mr. Speaker, you can easily be targeted and things go wrong. So this bill provides for that, that they will make sure, this committee will make sure that the governor-elect is provided with adequate security for the period before he is actually sworn in. In that case, things are okay. The other good thing with this bill is also that in a case, Mr. Speaker, where the governor comes in, it says in case the governor is not able to assume office, then there's a clear provision of how the deputy governor assumes office. In case where the governor and the deputy governor are not able to assume office, it is clearly provided for here in Speaker how the Speaker of the County Assembly assumes office. And one of the things we are discussing as a committee is that in a case where the Speaker of the County Assembly assumes office on a temporary kind of arrangement for before elections are conducted, we're asking ourselves, what happens if the county speaker is also interested in contesting as a governor in case that allows? So that's something we need to think through, and I think it doesn't come out clear in the bill, Mr. Speaker. And I think as we move forward, the House and the Senate should think what happens. Because a speaker might also be interested in becoming the governor. In case the deputy governor and the governor are not there, and there is a free election, then the speaker might decide, I want also to become a governor. Which means that time then, who assumes office? And these are some of the issues we need to address so that we don't have gaps which could cause issues, which can cause issues. The other important clause is clause 13. And what this clause does, Mr. Speaker, it addresses the issue of handing over of instruments of power. You know, every government has what we call instruments of power. This includes the flag, it includes the coat of arms, the constitution, and the seal. And what we are saying, Mr. Speaker, is at times you have seen governors who, because I've lost the election as a governor, I may not be there to present these things to the governor-elect. Because at that time, there is almost a lot of differences and feeling like you are being unfair to me. And more in areas where people are thinking of going to court to petition. They may not want even to go to the governor-elect and hand over. So we are saying where that happens, Mr. Speaker, the county secretary being the civil servant then should be able to undertake that assignment. Make sure that instruments of power are handed over to the governor-elect. So to me, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the good things which are coming from this bill, and things which I think is move forward. If we support them, it will help. I can see I'm being warned. In terms of funding, Honorable Keon, what we have said is each county government should be able to budget, to come up with a reasonable budget for this ceremony. But we have seen a lot of wastage, I agree with you. And I think what would be, once you bring the Ministry of Devolution, then they could come up with some range of figures that you can be within this range, the lowest and the highest, so that people don't take these ceremonies as a way of misuse of public resources.
Well.
So with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Very well. Next is Honorable, to my right is Honorable Kimani Kuria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute to this Assumption of Office County Governors Bill of 2018. Mr. Speaker, in 2010, we voted in for a new constitution. And this legislation shows us that we are serious in the implementation of this constitution. And to quote Honorable Kioni that said that the implementation of the Constitution is not a one-day thing, but could be something that could do in a lifetime, and including passing pieces of legislation to support the implementation of this Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at the second schedule that gives the format for county information that should be available and should be handed over to the new governor, Mr. Speaker. In addition to the list of the assets and the list of liabilities and reconciled bank accounts of the county, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at very important data of the county staff establishment per department. Mr. Speaker, we've had an issue of county staff, especially during the handover, where every new governor that comes, almost every new governor that has got into office, the first thing they did was to do a staff audit of the employees of that county. And Mr. Speaker, as a result, we are losing competent staff in our government and especially in our counties, because professionals, accountants, doctors, architects, engineers, they have taken county jobs as something that they do only during the term of that governor, Mr. Speaker. And as a result, when the new governor comes in, most of them and most of the time succeed to get rid of all the employees, of nearly all the employees that have been serving that county government and bring in their own employees, Mr. Speaker. And this has jeopardized the quality of service in our counties. We need to recognize, Mr. Speaker, that our counties are going concern. We don't have a county government of Nakuru for 5 years and another county government for another 5 years. These are county governments that continue in perpetuity as a going concern, irrespective of who serves in the office. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, this pieces of legislation that recognizes this and enacts this into law will continue to make sure that this is sustained, Mr. Speaker. I'm also looking at one of the clauses that says that the county executive officers in the counties should pass legislation at their counties to enable this act and to add provisions so that they give that could be say tailor-made to these particular counties, Mr. Speaker. And this, if taken seriously by our members of county assembly, by our county executive officers, will ensure that smooth running of our counties, Mr. Speaker. We, with the enactment of the new constitution, we created 47 governments. And as a result, we created 47, we created different, if you take, for example, the issue of water, we ended up with 47 ministries of water, which therefore, Mr. Speaker, tells us, as maybe as a house, we need to come back and find out those functions that got devolved. Why do we continue to hold parent ministries at the national government? If, for example, we have a ministry of water in all the 47 counties, and we say that in our constitution that water is a devolved function, why do we still continue to have a ministry of water at the national government? And sometimes, when you go through these counties or even our constituencies, they are not in a single project that is supposed to be done by the national government. And therefore, I'm tempted, Mr. Speaker, to believe that most of the wastages that we have in our wage bill, in our country, is mainly in the executive, and especially in the duplication of these roles. If Ministry of Health, Mr. Speaker, and Ministry of Health is devolved, so we have 47 ministries of health across the 47 counties. And yet, we still have a Ministry of Health at the national government. And how many ministries do they run? Talk about water. We're talking about water. We're talking about health. We're talking about land. So maybe we need to collapse these ministries at the national level to probably a coordination ministry so that we avoid this duplication of resources and bring down the wastages that we see in duplication of roles between the national government and the county government. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I support this bill.
Honorable Nakara Lodepe, member for Turkana Central.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice on this bill. First of all, Honorable Speaker, I would like to thank the Senate for taking their time to come up with this bill so that we cannot have confusion in handing over during the incoming and outgoing governor. Honorable Speaker, the committee the ad hoc committee that will take over to organize the assumption of the office, there's an issue that's very sensitive, Honorable Speaker, the issue of gender. Honorable Speaker, most of the people who have been appointed as chief officers, most of them are men. Honorable Speaker, including the County Commission and others. I was suggesting, Honorable Speaker, maybe in the future, we need to be clear on the gender and also a disabled group, so that, Honorable Speaker, we will not have a one-gender committee doing this work. So, Honorable Speaker, I would like the chairman to take note of that, so that we can have a gender-sensitive committee to run over, so that they can bring the experiences and also their issues during that period. Honorable Speaker, another issue that I would like to bring to attention is number 5, where it says that the members referred to in subsection 2.1 shall be nominated upon the declaration of the final result of the election of the governor. Honorable Speaker, sometimes we have a petition. Sometimes we have a petition, and if this will be declared before the petition has been declared or cleared, what will happen, Honorable Speaker? Because sometimes people rush to court to stop the swearing or to stop the handing over. So maybe we need to see how that process can be done, or we need to make sure that the court gives ruling immediately, because sometimes the court takes time before giving the ruling, and whoever will be given the office, he will assume. And once he gets to the office, Honorable Speaker, he will now use the resources of the public to fight the battle. So, Honorable Speaker, I think it's good to see if everything is cleared. Let's give a period of time so that we don't have the petition, we don't have any dispute. Then we declare the members who are going to be formed eligible to continue with their work. So I don't know how we can address that, Honorable Speaker, but I want the chairman to take note of that, because sometimes we have legal issues that come after election, and some members want to stop the swearing and also assumption of the office. Honorable Speaker, another issue that I want to bring over is about the handing over. Should be actually said very clearly, because, Honorable Speaker, the property that the county government has belongs to the public. I can highlight the case of Tarakanidhi, whereby a big generator, which costs a lot of money, disappeared. Immediately, the new governor came in. So, Honorable Speaker, we need to see how we can safeguard the properties of the public during that period of handing over. We should make sure that immediately after election, we protect the properties, because sometimes those who are already in power take that period to take away some properties from their offices and assume belong to them. So, Madam Honorable Speaker, we need to address that issue, that immediately or during election period, we shall have a committee to take all the records of all the properties of the county government, so that in case the sitting governor will lose, will not come back again and take those who are not recorded. So that one, Honorable Speaker, is an issue that we need to see how we can address it. Honorable Speaker, the issue of the process, I think the bill has given the process how we can do it. And Honorable Speaker, we want to thank the Senate for this, because you have seen we had cases whereby some governors left the offices and ceremonially, without even handing keys or even welcoming the new incoming governor to take over. I think, Honorable Speaker, we need also to put a legal something that can actually force the outgoing governor, to make him bind him, so that he cannot leave the office and ceremonially without handing over everything that are needed. Honorable Speaker, he has mentioned about other tools that are supposed to be given to the new or incoming governor. Because some of them, once they have realized they have been defeated and have done a lot of harm to the county government, they disappear like that. So we need to get a way of making them to abide that they will never leave the office or leave the country until he hands over everything to the incoming governor. I think, Honorable Speaker, if you do that one, then we can safeguard the properties of the county government. Honorable Speaker, with those few remarks, I think I support it. Thank you.
Honorable Huru for order. Member for Isiro North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important bill. Senate Bill number 1 of 2018 on the assumption of office of county governors, county governor. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Senate for coming up with this important piece of proposed piece of legislation, which is aimed at filling a lacuna in law as far as assumption of office of governor is concerned. Mr. Speaker, the bill outlines a very clear process which guides how a governor-elect is supposed to be sworn in. Mr. Speaker, having witnessed swearing in of 2 governors, those who are elected after 2013 general election and those who got elected last year, you will realize that the period between when a governor is declared to be the winner and the time when they are sworn into the offices, there is a lot of uncertainty and also a lot of issues that take place, which also jeopardizes security of the governor-elect and so on and so forth. I particularly witnessed the swearing in of our current governor. The circumstances which were, the way the function was organized was such that the outgoing governor could not participate because there are no clear provision of who is in charge of making arrangements and who is supposed actually to connect the outgoing governor and the incoming governor. It made it very difficult for the outgoing governor to actually attend the ceremony and hand over the instruments of power. And that happened because we did not have laws which clearly guide the process of handing over and taking over of power by governors-elect and outgoing governors. In this proposed legislation, a committee which is supposed to actually organize the swearing in is clearly outlined. The membership is clearly outlined. And I'm happy that actually the chair has been proposed to be the county secretary. Mr. Speaker, the county secretary is actually the head of public service in our counties. And therefore, the holder of that office actually knows what has been happening in the previous years before the election took place. And actually is the senior-most civil servant, and therefore he can also, because he supervises the chief officers and coordinates also the county executive, the person who holds that office is better placed to actually provide crucial information for the incoming governor. He can also be a very good link between a situation where a governor is voted out and therefore we have an outgoing governor and incoming one. He can actually be a very good link between the two. I'm happy also that this legislation actually requires the outgoing governor to hand over certain instruments of power which are outlined, and therefore this actually obligates the outgoing governor to attend the swearing-in ceremony, and after the new governor-elect is sworn in, to hand over those instruments of power. At the same time, because you cannot rule out, mischief where an outgoing governor can refuse to attend, then there is also a clause saying that, if an outgoing governor has not handed over those, that does not validate the swearing in, which I think also is something which is very important. And then, Mr. Speaker, it is also important that the bill has actually made adequate provisions for the governor-elect to be provided with all the crucial information that he may require, and that a public officer who withholds information requested by governor-elect, according to this bill, actually commits a crime, and the penalty for doing that is also specified. Because you cannot rule out a situation where, you know, an officer who have served under an outgoing governor can actually frustrate the governor-elect before he or she is sworn into office. Mr. Speaker, the bill also has made provisions for situations where governor-elects actually dies before the swearing in, and what should happen. And it has also made clear provisions for the timeline within which the governor-elect should be sworn in. There's a specific day and specific days after the election, after the results are officially declared. And this actually helps us to get rid of uncertainties surrounding the swearing in and assumption of office by governors-elect. And therefore, looking at the various provisions of this bill, I'm happy that most of the challenges that we have witnessed when it comes to swearing in of governors-elect, from my own perspective and from the way I've read this bill, are adequately addressed. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Senate and also our own committee for national security for having looked at the Senate bill and also submitting it to this House after, you know, going through it and making appropriate amendments on the basis of what they have heard from various stakeholders. And therefore, I support this bill. Thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable Waihenya. You have the floor on this bill as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me an opportunity to support this very important bill regarding the assumption of office by the governor. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the drafters of this bill because they have taken into account the most important aspect of handover to the new governor who has been elected. Mr. Speaker, in the second schedule, it has been clearly outlined that there should be a category of all the assets that the new governor and his county is going to inherit. In the list of assets, Mr. Speaker, it is indicated land, residential estates, staff housing, office blocks, learning institutions, farmland, rented premises, and developed land, others, motor vehicles, Mr. Speaker, plant and equipment, furniture, tangible and intangible assets, biological assets, heritage and cultural assets. Mr. Speaker, I'll give an example of the Nairobi City County, where, Mr. Speaker, now almost 1.5 years after we have a new county governor, Mr. Speaker, we still don't have a catalog of all the public land we have. We don't have a roll call of all the assets, of all the landed properties that are owned by the county government of Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, it is sad that since he took over as governor of Nairobi and his county, they have not been able to revoke the titles that were obtained fraudulently by grabbers for public utilities, for nursery schools, for primary schools, for hospitals, and for recreational centers. Mr. Speaker, I would want to ask the county of Nairobi, together with the National Art Commission, I want to challenge them and ask them, how many titles have they issued for the public schools in the city of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker? How many titles have they issued for the markets, Mr. Speaker? It is sad that even today, Mr. Speaker, the grabbing of public utilities continues unabated. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, you'll find every day hawkers running away from council askaris because the only few markets that are there, which were built decades ago, Mr. Speaker, are filled to capacity, and our hawkers, our traders, our grocers, our Metuba dealers have nowhere to display and sell their wares. Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to the governor of Nairobi and remind him that he enjoyed our confidence. We supported him together with his running mate, Polycarp Igathe. And he personally admitted, the governor of Nairobi during the campaigns personally admitted that the deputy governor, his running mate, would complement his abilities and capacities in the management of the city of Nairobi. But Mr. Speaker, after the resignation of Polycarp Igathe, a worthy technocrat who is now heading the Equity Bank, Governor Sogo has not found a suitable man or woman in the whole 4 million population of Kenyans living in Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, we mourn the absence of a deputy governor in this city who can be able to work together with our governor and support his efforts. Mr. Speaker, the work of governor is not simple. It is time-consuming, it is technical, it involves serving many residents, Mr. Speaker. I appeal to Governor Sogo to hasten and honor his promise to the people of Nairobi by picking a man or woman to be his deputy governor, to fill in his shortages and his shortcomings, so that he takes full responsibility for the management of Nairobi City, which generates almost half of the country's GDP. Mr. Speaker, the people of Nairobi are suffering. The Nairobi Regeneration Program, Mr. Speaker, has flushed out all hawkers on the roads, on roundabouts, in open spaces, Mr. Speaker. Where are the people of Nairobi expected to trade? And the government has not built any stalls, has not built any markets. Mr. Speaker, we as the leadership in Nairobi and in the county government of Nairobi, and this appeal also goes to His Excellency the President, who I know is committed to helping solve the problem of shortages of markets in Nairobi, to come up with a quick solution so that we create employment for our people, we create market facilities for them. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I have been in Juakali for a long time. I'm actually a Juakali operator for so many years, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Nairobi don't need markets that they are going to wait for World Bank to build or the city county to build. What the hawkers and operators of Nairobi need is just land. Give us land where we can build our stalls. Traders in Nairobi have capacity. Traders in Wakurima have capacity. Traders in Gikoba, Mr. Speaker, have sufficient resources to build for themselves a market.
They need not wait for government. We only need the intervention of government to resolve the matter of the ownership of the land in Gikoba. Then the traders themselves can be able to invest their money in building modern kiosks, modern stalls, to be able to do business. And this goes for all other markets, even in Kiabu, even in Athi River. Create space for the hawkers, create space for small micro enterprises. Give us land, we shall do the rest. We will put infrastructure, we will build. We don't need to wait for donors. We don't need to wait for the ministry. We have resources, we have money. Just point to us, this is the land. Resolve the issues of land in Gikoba, resolve the issues of land in Mudhurwa, and give us part of all that land you want to develop for multiple story buildings, like in Pamwani. We create markets. We have capacity in Juakali. Mr. Speaker, I wish to support this bill and plead with the governor of Nairobi, who we respect a lot and who we support, to quickly hasten to appoint a deputy governor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Honorable Ihenya, I allowed you, but you sounded like you are now on a 0-hour session. But nevertheless, you support. Now, in the circumstances and there being no other interest to speak to this, I will call the mover to reply. Honorable Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply and thank the honorable members who have made very valuable contribution. And Honorable Speaker, I also want to confirm to the honorable members that the issue of secretariat and budget is well taken care of in the new amendments. And Honorable Speaker, this amendment should now hold, once completed, governance accountable and transparent. And this amendment, Honorable Speaker, shall bring order in County Assembly. Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply, and thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Well, Honorable Chair, now I'll peg putting question on that particular order until a subsequent time. Next order.
Order number 16, motion, report on Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital Project.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Health, Honorable Sabina Chege must be. Her or the vice chair or any other member being absent, that business is stepped down. Very well, honorable members, there being no other business. The time being, all the members, please be on your feet. Honorable Redepe, please be on your feet. Honorable members, the time being 6:47 p.m., this House started adjourned till Tuesday, 4th December 2018 at 2:30 p.m.